Chapter 790. In the ruined city, Kay, Hamelin, and Beslay, the three powerhouses of the god's domain, surrounded the mysterious old woman. With the strength of the sacred domain, under the encirclement of the three powerhouses of the god's domain, it was impossible for her to escape, not to mention that Shea and the others were watching from the side. Who is that old woman? Is she a powerhouse of the sacred domain of our council? Kadena asked curiously. Vivian thought for a while and shook her head. I don't know, I've never seen this guy before, Shea frowned. This guy, what a strange aura. Beslay looked up and down at the old woman and said politely, These three beasts of the god's domain were hunted by the three of us, so their magic cores should belong to us. No matter what your purpose is, there is no reason for you to take things from us. Stop playing, old woman. Kay narrowed her eyes slightly and said lazily, Take the things back. In front of us three powerhouses of the god's domain, you, who only has the strength of the sacred domain, have no ability to decide the ownership of the three magic cores. The old woman laughed sinisterly, and her resentful eyes swept over Kay and the others. She said coldly, Is that so? Hamelin had a bad feeling in his heart. It was reasonable to say that the guy who only had the strength of the sacred domain could not be so calm in front of them. What was she relying on? The old woman's eyes swept over Hamelin, Beslay, and the others, and finally fell on Kay. She smiled sinisterly, gritted her teeth, and said word by word, You are dead. After saying that, under the exclamations of Beslay and the others, she swallowed the three magic cores in her hands as fast as she could. What's going on? Kadena was shocked. She swallowed the magic cores. Shea's face sank. Aurora said, What does she want to do? Damn it, give them back. Seeing the three priceless magic cores of the god's domain beasts being swallowed by the old woman, Kay was anxious. Boom! In an instant, the old woman, who had swallowed the three magic cores of the god's domain beasts, burst out with a dazzling brilliance. At this time, the old woman's figure slowly rose, and a large amount of red light appeared on her body, forming a huge fireball in the air, like the sun, radiating light in all directions. What stunned Kay and the others was that the old woman's sacred domain beasts were sacred domain beasts of the domain beasts of the god's domain beasts. Early Saint Realm, Mid Saint Realm, High Saint Realm, Peak Saint Realm. The old woman's to the domains. Boom! A massive explosion sounded out as the light around the old woman's body became even brighter. In an instant, a powerful energy filled the sky, forming an extremely low pressure that was filled with a dangerous and terrifying aura. God! How is that? Her strength has already reached the god realm. Beslay's face paled, and she took a step back in horror. An ordinary sacred domain expert had become a god realm expert in a matter of minutes. This matter was far beyond her imagination. Her strength is still growing, this is too scary. Hamelin's expression was solemn. His grip on the bone staff tightened, and his palms were slick with cold sweat. This is impossible. Kay shuddered, for she could feel that the mysterious old woman's strength had begun to surpass her own. The powerful god realm aura was overwhelming, causing a chill to rise from the bottom of one's heart. The most frightening thing was that the old woman's strength was still growing. The magic cores of the Phoenix, Thunder Rock, and Frost Eagle, these three strange beasts from the realm of the gods were constantly fusing and colliding within the old woman's body. In the end, they transformed into a red energy that was like the rising sun, illuminating all directions. Under this powerful force, the whole world seemed to be trembling. She's already a mid-level god realm, in a room in a space crack on the Noah continent. Noah's eyes were fixed on the screen as he slowly said, That old woman's current strength had far surpassed all the powerhouses on the Noah continent, and Noah could no longer sit still. Master, who is she? Mary looked at the crystal ball and asked in astonishment. A crazy woman. Noah sighed slightly, and the corners of his mouth raised into a bitter smile. This is a conflict between me and her. I didn't expect that she would actually come looking for me. That was a matter of a few years ago, when I was training in the main plane. I met her. She's a super-ranked divine beast with terrifying strength. Divine beast? She's actually a divine beast? Mary asked in surprise. Yes, a divine beast. Noah waved his hand and said in a deep voice, she's a terrifying creature of a higher level than a god realm magical beast. According to legend, her strength is not inferior to a god's existence. Right now, she's not at her peak strength, she's recovering. Once she recovers all her strength, she'll be the most powerful and terrifying divine beast. At that time, I broke into her territory. That place was called the Cinder Woods. Yes, the Cinder Woods. That was the only way for me to go to Sky City, but I didn't expect to be blocked by her, Noah said slowly as he sank into his memories. The two of us had a disagreement, so we fought in the Cinder Woods. Our strength was about the same, and the fight lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Mary was flustered as she listened. One could imagine how fierce the battle was at that time, but Noah seemed to be talking about an unimportant matter, his face full of indifference. And then? You defeated her? Mary asked. Noah nodded. Yes, I killed her. Mary exclaimed, then, isn't she dead? Yes, she died. But she came back to life later, Noah said, sighing silently. Mary sighed as she listened. She didn't expect that the old woman was Master's enemy in the main plane, and that she came to Noah mainland to seek revenge. She's already a high-level god realm. Noah's gaze turned to the crystal ball, his expression dignified. He finally realized the seriousness of the matter. He sighed and said with a bitter smile, it seems that whether I'm willing or not, I have to rush back from the main plane. If this continues, the entire Noah mainland will be finished. As Noah said this, a trace of killing intent flashed in the corner of his eyes. Mary's heart trembled. She knew that Master was finally enraged. At this time, the red light in the fireball gradually faded, revealing the scene inside. At this time, the old woman who was wrapped in the fireball had disappeared and was replaced by a beautiful young woman with a cold face. The red light slowly dissipated, revealing the young woman's beautiful face. She sneered slightly, her red phoenix eyes revealing a monstrous killing intent, as if she wanted to devour everything in the world. After swallowing the magic cores of the 3 god realm beasts, the old woman's strength finally recovered. She seemed to have been reborn, dozens of years younger, and her face glowed with radiance, radiant and beautiful. Kay, Homelin, and Besley were already stunned. Oh right, Master, what kind of divine beast is she? She's so strong? Mary thought for a moment and asked. She was curious about the identity of this divine beast. Noah stared at the crystal ball for a long time before slowly spitting out a few words. Chapter 791. Everyone stared at the ball of light in the sky. The power in the ball of light slowly dissipated, and the young woman who had regained her youth stood quietly in the sky, coldly watching everything in the world. At this moment, the might, bearing, and power she exuded had far exceeded the scope of everyone's understanding. Who is she? Why is she so powerful? Besley's eyes were filled with fear as she asked. Her strength has surpassed that of Demon Sophia from 7 years ago. Homelin's face was tense, and the muscles on his face trembled slightly. She's even infinitely close to the resurrected Grand Commander of the Burning Legion. Kay said in a trembling voice. Mary told me that Lord Noah has left the Noah continent. Is this the prelude to the destruction of the Noah continent? The young woman stood in the sky with her hands behind her back, and her beautiful eyes swept across the faces of Kay, Homelin, and Besley, her cold eyes without a trace of emotion. Besley swallowed hard and asked boldly, Your Excellency, who are you? Why have you come to our Noah continent? Now that things had developed to this point, if they still could not guess that the other party was a god realm powerhouse from another plane, they would not be able to survive. You The young woman smiled coldly and raised her hand slightly, killing intent in the corners of her eyes. You don't have the right to ask for my name. With a swish, she suddenly attacked without warning. An orange-red power blasted out through her slender fingers like a sharp sword. Boom! Besley was caught off guard and was hit head-on by the power. She screamed and fell down. Besley! And Besley, Kay and Hamelin were shocked. They did not expect that the dark dragon Besley, who had advanced to God-realm powerhouse, could not even take a single blow from the other party. What frightened them even more was that the power released by the young woman faintly contained the smell of divine power. I'll kill you. Kay's eyes suddenly turned red. He roared and his body suddenly changed. Not long after, a huge Beaumont beast weighing more than 10 tons appeared in front of the young woman. Kay, who had transformed into a Beaumont beast, raised his huge fist and punched the mysterious young woman. It was a simple punch. Kay had used his strongest martial skill for this punch. The fist energy broke through the void, and there was a faint sound of wind and thunder. Even the mysterious young woman was slightly moved by the power of this punch. Her eyes were filled with praise. That punch of yours isn't bad. In the early God realm, there's basically no one who can match you. Too bad, your opponent is me. As the young woman spoke, she slowly raised one of her forearms, and the orange-red energy gathered once again. Although I haven't recovered the full strength of a divine beast, it should be enough to deal with you little bugs. With that said, the young woman's forefinger pointed forward, colliding with Beaumont's giant fist. Bang! Time seemed to stop. Kay felt as if his fist had hit an invisible barrier and was forcibly stopped. No. Can. Kay's eyes widened in disbelief. Go down. The young woman smiled faintly and flicked her finger. Kay felt a heavy blow to his chest, so depressed that he vomited a mouthful of blood. His huge body fell to the ground, slamming into the mountain wall, causing the mountain peak to crumble and debris to fly in all directions. How is this possible? The situation had taken a shocking turn. For a moment, Vivian and the others on the ground were stupefied. An ordinary sacred domain expert had become a God realm expert stronger than Kay and the others by swallowing several God realm exotic beasts' magic cores. How could such a thing happen? Could it be that the God realm exotic beasts' magic cores really had such an effect? At this moment, all the experts on Noah mainland despaired. On the 18th floor of the planar prison, in a dark and damp tunnel, thousands of people carefully groped their way forward, moving step by step, afraid that they would trigger some mechanism. Bald Mike's shouts kept coming from the front. Hurry up! Hurry up! Don't dilly-dally! Slow down and I'll beat you to death! His overbearing words made Klein frown. He whispered to Ron, "This guy is shouting so loudly. Isn't he afraid of alerting a large number of primordial guards?" Ron shook his head helplessly. This guy was in danger, yet he was still so high-profile. It was as if he was afraid that others wouldn't know. He was simply courting death. However, the bald man was very strong. Ron and the others could only swallow their anger and let him scold them. After all, the other party was their captain. Strangely enough, no matter how loudly the bald man shouted, not a single one of those primordial guards appeared. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air. Something's wrong. Ron and Klein glanced at each other, their eyes filled with doubt. At this moment, Ron felt a throbbing in his chest. He looked down and saw that his telepathy necklace was vibrating again, emitting a soft light. However, Ron, Frigga, R.A., Firth, Undine, and everyone else's telepathy reacted. Seeing everyone's shocked gazes, Ron finally understood that something must have happened on Noah mainland. "Ron, what's the matter?" Klein asked in a low voice from the crowd. "Nothing." Ron shook his head. He didn't plan on telling Klein about what had happened on Noah mainland. Moreover, he didn't know what had happened on Noah mainland. Klein followed the crowd and slowly moved forward. Suddenly, he felt a familiar aura. Klein was stunned. His heart couldn't help but beat wildly, and his expression was full of excitement. It's him. There's no mistake, it's his aura. I finally found it. Klein was so excited that he almost cried out. At this time, Klein quickly took a few deep breaths and forced himself to calm down. He swept his gaze and saw the path leading to another room on the 18th floor. There were countless stone pillars forming a magic formation. It's here. This is the place where Sir Utaris was imprisoned. A glint flashed in Klein's eyes as he warily scanned the people around him. Seeing that no one had noticed him, he was overjoyed. He moved his feet slightly and quietly left the group. With a flash, he transformed into a black fog and disappeared from where he stood. Sir Utaris, I've come to welcome you out of prison. Klein couldn't hold back the ecstasy in his heart. After leaving the group, he quickly rushed in the direction of the magic formation, 1 step, 2 step. Just as he was approaching the magic formation, a huge body suddenly appeared in front of Klein. Klein was startled and immediately stopped, almost bumping into the person. The one who stopped Klein was the domineering bald man, Mike of the surviving adventurers. He had his hands on his hips and looked aggressive as he coldly stared at Klein. "What are you doing here?" You, seeing that he was about to succeed, who knew that the bald man would ruin his plan. Klein was about to make a move, but soon, his clenched fists loosened. It wasn't wise to make a move now. "I went in the wrong direction," Klein lowered his head and whispered. "Oh, is that so?" The bald man's tone eased as he pointed behind Klein and said indifferently, "Go back. Don't run around in this Bartlos prison. It won't be good if you attract a large number of ancient guardians. Whether it's you or us, we'll all be in huge trouble. As long as you follow me, you'll definitely safely reach the planar teleportation point at the bottom of the prison." "Yes, Sir Mike." Klein was filled with hatred, but he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he humbly bowed and smiled. "May the gods bless you." After saying that, he turned and walked back to the group. Mike looked at Klein's back as he left, and the corner of his mouth revealed an imperceptible sneer. Seeing Klein suddenly disappear and reappear, Ron was a little stunned. "Klein, where did you go? Why couldn't I find you?" At this moment, Klein's face was gloomy, as if he had been forced to eat a fly. He said angrily, "Don't mention it, I don't want to get angry." Seeing Klein's extremely unhappy expression, Ron could only swallow the words that were at the tip of his tongue. After walking for a few minutes in the passage, everyone felt their eyes light up as they arrived at a spacious hall. This hall was extremely large, and it seemed extremely spacious even though it could accommodate thousands of people. The floor of the hall was paved with hard bluestone, and hundreds of magic lamps hung high on the ceiling, emitting bright light. "Haha! We've finally reached our destination." At this moment, Mike's overbearing voice came from the front, and his tone was full of excitement. "What, we've already arrived?" When everyone heard this, they were stunned for a moment before they were overjoyed. But where was the planar teleportation point? Everyone looked around, anxiously looking for the planar teleportation point. "Haha! Then it's not a planar teleportation point." Mike grinned and pointed at the door not far away. They saw that the door extended to a long stone bridge that was about a few kilometers long. At the end of the stone bridge, there was a tall, pointed pillar that was constantly rotating, and the top emitted a bright, blue light. If that wasn't a planar teleportation point, then what was it? Hooray! A burst of cheers erupted from the crowd, and some people could no longer hold back their excitement as they ran in the direction of the planar teleportation point. "We're here. We're finally here. We can finally go back." Firth and Hao Qin laughed heartily, while Undine and Frigga hugged each other and cried tears of joy. Only Klein's expression was uncertain, and he didn't look very happy. He stared fixedly at the bald man, his eyes full of anger and a trace of fear. "That's great." Ron also waved his fist and shouted to the sky. He grabbed Klein's shoulder and said, "Klein, we can finally go back. We can finally go back. Why do you seem unhappy?" The excited Ron didn't get the response he expected from Klein, and he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. "Is that so?" Klein smiled sadly. "Ron, do you really think we can go back safely? Stop dreaming." Ron was obviously stunned when he heard this. "What's wrong?" Klein looked calmly at Ron and said word by word. Chapter 792. What? Ron was confused. "What did you say?" "Charge, run, don't push." After a short cheer, the surviving adventurers rushed forward like floodwaters, afraid that they would fall behind. In an instant, the entire stone bridge was packed with people. Frigga walked over, glanced at Klein, and said softly, "Ron, let's leave as soon as possible." Ron opened his mouth, but before he could reply, a loud and clear voice was heard. "Ha ha! You want to leave just like that?" As he spoke, there was a boom, and the stone at the entrance of the spacious hall collapsed for no reason, blocking everyone's path. In an instant, everyone was stunned, not knowing what had happened. Ron's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head and saw that the one who did it was none other than the bald man called Mike. At this moment, he was standing at the top of the hall with his hands behind his back, looking down at everyone with his eagle-like eyes. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised, revealing a playful smile. "This, Sir Mike, what do you mean by this?" an adventurer asked boldly. "Ha, you're leaving just like that? Did you ask me?" The bald man pointed at his own nose and said with a smile that did not look like a smile, "Aren't you going to ask who I am?" Everyone was dumbfounded. They looked at each other, not knowing what to do. At this moment, an adventurer asked boldly, "Sir Mike, aren't you the captain of us adventurers, the natural leader, Sir Mike? Sir Mike, your glorious deeds are like the sun illuminating our path forward, dispelling the fog in Bartlow's prison. Yes, you're Sir Mike, the one who led us through the interdimensional teleportation formation, Honorable Sir Mike. You're so great," the adventurers said flatteringly. The path home was right in front of them. Everyone was generous with their praise for Mike. They only had one thought in their minds, and that was to return as soon as possible. Some other adventurers were not so polite. "Sir Mike, you've already completed your mission. Why are you still talking so much nonsense? Get out of the way and let us go back." "That's right. I've had enough of this." Another adventurer was also indignant. "Who do you think you are?" Ha. The bald man laughed crazily once again. His laughter carried a powerful sound wave, shaking the dust on the roof of the hall and causing it to fall down. At this time, he stopped laughing and said coldly, "Poor guys. It seems that you really don't know who I am." "I know." As soon as the bald man finished speaking, a figure stood out. It was the divine necromancer Klein. When the bald man heard this, he was a little surprised. He sized up Klein a few times, and the corner of his mouth still had that playful smile. "So it's you, the little guy who went the wrong way just now. You know who I am? Not bad." Klein took a deep breath and raised his head slightly. He looked at the bald man and said loudly, "You are the guardian of Bartlow's prison, the ancient dragon Maxwell." "What?" Klein's voice was no less than a bolt from the blue, shocking everyone in an instant. This bald man who had brought them all the way from the 12th floor of Bartlow's prison was actually the guardian of Bartlow's prison, Maxwell? Was this a joke? If this was a joke, then it was not funny at all. Ron looked at Klein's increasingly serious face in astonishment. He knew that Klein was serious. Ha. The bald man laughed loudly again. He stared at Klein with a trace of admiration in his eyes. At this time, Maxwell smiled and slowly said, "You are indeed a smart little guy. Not bad. You guessed right, I am Maxwell." "What? He's Maxwell?" Once this was said, everyone was shocked. Swish, 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 countless weapons were drawn from the hands of the adventurers. After knowing the identity of the other party, the atmosphere suddenly became tense. At this time, Ron gasped. He finally understood why this bald man called Mike was so familiar with the roads of Bartlos prison, and why everything had been so smooth since he had followed his team. It had been so smooth that they had not met a single ancient guard, not a single one. There was finally an answer to all of this. He was Maxwell. He was the guardian of the planar prison of Bartlos, a supreme existence. Although I've guessed your identity, what I don't understand is, why are you doing this? Klein stared at Maxwell. With your strength, you can easily kill all of us. Why? Why did you bring us here? The purpose is very simple. This is just a game. It's too boring to stay in this godforsaken Bartlos prison. That's why I wanted to have some fun. Maxwell yawned softly. He did not care about the thousands of adventurers at all. He spread out his hands and smiled. But now, the game is over. After saying that, Maxwell let out a low roar, and the muscles on his body trembled. Following that, his body expanded like a balloon, and two large, curved horns grew on his head. Gray scales covered his entire body, and the wings on his back spread open. An incomparably ferocious aura was released in an instant, filling the entire space. Not long after, a monster that was 7 or 8 meters tall, covered in black scales, with a pair of wings on his back and 4 legs as thick as an elephant's, stood in front of everyone. It looked like a combination of a human's upper body and a dragon's lower body. It looked abnormally strange, but this monster emitted a terrifying aura that made one's heart tremble. The powerful energy turned into countless white flames. As the flames rose, they formed an extremely powerful aura around Maxwell. Air currents continuously surged in all directions, filling the sky with smoke and dust. The surrounding adventurers were forced to retreat by the powerful energy and aura. The entire Bartlos prison was shaking, and large cracks spread out on the ground like a spider web. Ron's eyes widened. His eyes were first filled with shock, then extreme fear. This was because he could feel the terrifying energy contained within the white flames. The ugly face of Maxwell's ancient dragon form revealed a sinister smile. He stretched out his hand, and with a whoosh, a huge, single-edged saber that was more than 10 meters long appeared in his hand. This abnormally large saber was covered in blood-red flame patterns. Ha ha! Go and die, lowly worms! Maxwell laughed maniacally and swung the saber in his hand. Boom! The white flames exploded in the crowd like a blooming flower. In just an instant, dozens of people were swallowed by the white flames. Save me! Run! Lord Maxwell, please spare me! To these adventurers, they were in heaven a moment ago, but in the next moment they had fallen into hell. Maxwell stepped into the crowd and waved his saber, wantonly killing. In an instant, flesh and blood flew everywhere, and corpses were everywhere. The frightened people scattered in all directions, and the scene was chaotic. Some people were so frightened that they knelt down and kept begging for mercy. Some people were already scared stiff, standing on the spot and trembling, unable to even speak. Divine power? He's using divine power? Undine said in horror. Although she was still a long distance away from Maxwell, she could clearly feel her body trembling at this moment. It's not just divine power. The corners of Klein's mouth revealed a bitter smile. The guardian of Bartlos prison, the ancient dragon, Maxwell, is a god himself. Why would he need to borrow the power of a god? God? Ron and the others were stunned. They understood from Klein that the guardian of Bartlos prison was an extremely terrifying powerhouse, but they did not expect ancient dragon Maxwell to be a god. Gods were also known as gods. In the legends of the various major dimensions, gods were supreme existences. Their dignity could not be blasphemed. Divine power was the power of gods. Mortals could borrow it, but they could not possess it. This included Ron and Klein. The divine power of death that they had used before did not belong to them. Whether one truly possessed divine power was the most important sign that distinguished gods from mortals. The strength of mortals could only reach the peak of the divine realm, but the difference between the peak of the divine realm and a true god was like heaven and earth. The primordial dragon in front of them was a deity, or rather, a divine beast. In front of this terrifyingly powerful supreme divine beast, all the powerhouses in the divine territory had lost their will to resist. They either screamed and fled, or knelt down and begged for mercy. Unfortunately, the ferocious Maxwell was unmoved. He continued to slash at them like he was chopping vegetables. Those cowardly adventurers who had given up resistance instantly fell into a pool of blood. The origin of the bloody flame broadsword in Maxwell's hand was not ordinary. It was a true divine weapon. Every time he killed an adventurer, the broadsword would absorb the life essence of that adventurer. As the massacre unfolded, more and more life essence entered the broadsword. The bloody flame on the blade began to flow, making people feel as if the broadsword was alive. It was a one-sided massacre. With the terrifying might and power of a god, there was no suspense in killing these powerhouses of the divine realm who had not even reached the peak of the divine realm. The entire hall turned into a slaughterhouse. The thousands of adventurers were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered, trembling under Maxwell's tyrannical might. They did not even have the courage to resist. The blazing flames illuminated Maxwell's ugly and ferocious face. At this moment, his face was filled with the pleasure of killing. The days of guarding the Bartlos prison were too boring. It was so boring that he had to find a way to have some fun. He had to bring these exhausted and pitiful adventurers who had been forced to break into the Bartlos prison to the last planar teleportation formation in the entire banished land. He would then personally extinguish the hope that had just been ignited in them and enjoy their expressions of extreme surprise turning into extreme fear. This was one of the most fun things he could think of. Some adventurers tried to rush out of the hall while Maxwell was wantonly slaughtering. They had just broken through the hole when they were discovered by Maxwell. Ha ha ha! Trying to escape? Stop dreaming. There has never been a precedent of anyone escaping from the planar prison of Bartlos. You lowly worms, die. Maxwell laughed maniacally, his hand holding the single-edged broadsword slightly raised, and a white halo suddenly spread out, enveloping everyone in an instant. Not good. He opened his domain. The exit has been sealed. We're finished. Chapter 793. The hall was like a slaughterhouse covered with bloodstains. All escape routes had been completely sealed off. The adventurers were wailing in despair, while the ancient dragon Maxwell mercilessly waved his single-edged broadsword, wantonly reaping the lives of these innocent adventurers. The scene was extremely bloody. Ron, what do we do now? Frigga looked at the scene in front of her in horror, her voice trembling as she asked. Not only her, but even R.A. Firth, Hao Qin, and the others had turned pale. Ron's clenched fists were trembling slightly, and his clothes were drenched in cold sweat. The power of a god was too terrifying. Killing these adventurers who only had the strength of the divine realm was like killing chickens. Now that things have come to this, there's no other way. Ron gritted his teeth, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the few powerhouses from the continent of Noah, and said word by word, "Let's fight. Fight." Ron's words were like a thunderbolt, sweeping away the haze in everyone's hearts and illuminating the path before them. For a moment, the fighting spirit in everyone's hearts burned fiercely. "All right, let's go together and kill him." R.A. Firth was the first to respond, his face full of anger. "That's right. We can't just sit here and wait for death," Hao Qin also said. He raised his eyebrows and raised the fist in his hand. At this moment, his heart was surging, as if his innate courage had once again returned to this Beaumont. R.A. Firth and Hao Qin both rubbed their fists. Even the two females from the Noah team, Fairy Dragon Frigga and Nature High Priestess Undine, were ready for battle. You guys," Klein at the side opened his mouth wide, his face full of disbelief. He then shook his head, revealing a bitter smile. It's useless. You don't know how powerful the ancient dragon Maxwell is. He's a god. It's a true god. Mortals like us can't possibly fight against a god. R.A. Firth and the others glanced at him but didn't say anything. Klein could feel the contempt in their eyes. These gazes of contempt were like sharp swords, deeply stabbing Klein's self-esteem. For a moment, he felt that he was a coward in everyone's eyes. At this time, Klein felt someone pat his shoulder. He looked back and saw that it was Ron. If one day you're destined to die, would you rather die in battle or would you rather kneel down and let the enemy cut off your head in humiliation? Ron smiled kindly and slowly said, Of course, everyone has their own choice, but for me, I prefer the former. Hearing Ron's words, Klein stood there in a daze. He looked at Ron as if he was looking at a stranger. Ron smiled and took a step forward, taking out the dragon bone staff from his spatial bag. At this moment, his eyes were burning with fighting spirit as he spoke in a clear voice. Today, even if I die in battle, I'll make this guy pay a huge price. Ron's tone was full of determination, and a trace of determination flashed in his eyes. He slowly raised his hand, and a huge amount of soul force crazily condensed. At this time, his feet became light, and his figure slowly rose into the air. Kill, kill, kill! At this moment, Maxwell was like an indestructible tank. Wherever he went, corpses were strewn everywhere. The adventurers were crying for their parents, kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy. Boom! At this time, a sudden loud sound exploded from Maxwell's body, and a powerful force instantly spread out, filling the entire space. In an instant, the entire hall was silent, and not a sound could be heard. At this moment, all the adventurers were stunned, and their faces were filled with extreme shock. Who had the guts to actually attack the guardian beast of hell? Maxwell? The ancient dragon, Maxwell, stopped and had a blank look on his face. Although the attack this time did not injure him, it had landed on his body. This was the first time in the history of Bartlow's prison that someone had attacked the guardian of the prison, Maxwell. This was a provocation towards him, the guardian beast of Bartlow's prison. Maxwell turned his head and coincidentally met Ron's gaze. At this moment, Ron was holding the white-boned spear in his hand, and his expression was as calm as water. "You're the one who hit me?" Maxwell looked at this unfamiliar face that was different from Klein's, and his face was filled with shock. From the other party's clothes, he could tell that he was also a necromancer. "That's right." Ron's expression sank. "I'm going to kill you." "What? You're going to kill me?" Maxwell was slightly moved, and when he finally understood what Ron meant, he could not help but laugh maniacally. "Ha ha! You said you're going to kill me? Ha ha! With just you, an undead? Ha ha! I'm dying of laughter." Ron did not laugh, and he slowly raised the white-boned spear in his hand. Black fog appeared on his body, and a powerful soul force condensed once more. "What? That undead? He said he's going to kill Maxwell? Is he sure he's not joking? How is this possible? Maxwell is a true divine beast, and that fellow is only a god-level powerhouse. How is this possible? Who is this necromancer?" After a short moment of shock, the adventurers who were still in shock began to whisper. No matter what, everyone admired Ron for daring to challenge Maxwell. "Lunatic, he's a lunatic." Klein's hands and feet were trembling. He could not understand Ron's courage no matter what. This was clearly an act of seeking death. Very good, Maxwell laughed until tears came out of his eyes. At this moment, he slowly raised his single-edged broadsword and said to Ron, "No matter who you are, I have a whole new level of respect for your courage. But it's a pity. Heroes often have to pay a price." After saying that, the broadsword in his hand slashed downwards. In an instant, A bright light green blade appeared and attacked Ron like a whirlwind. "Ron, be careful!" Kid dodged quickly. In an instant, all the adventurers cried out in alarm. Their hearts clenched as they worried for Ron's safety. Ron's nerves were already stretched taut. The moment Maxwell moved, he had already activated a defensive skill. Death protection. Swish, swish, swish. In the large amount of black fog, countless eerie white bones stretched out, tightly wrapping Ron inside like armor. Boom, the light green blade hit Ron. The two forces collided, and the powerful impact spread in all directions. Rumble, the whole hall shook, and everyone could not stand steadily. The impact even swept some of the weaker adventurers into the air. But where was Ron? Everyone was anxious. In the billowing smoke, they anxiously searched for Ron's figure. "This brave little guy, please don't die." The smoke began to dissipate, revealing the scene inside. They saw that the death protection that wrapped Ron had a large hole in it. Ron was inside, but he was safe and sound. Hooray! The crowd burst into cheers. In an instant, Ron's image was raised infinitely, and he became a hero in everyone's hearts. A rebel who faced death with equanimity. A necromancer who dared to face the gods. The few powerhouses in the divine realm of Noah continent looked at each other, and only then did they heave a sigh of relief at the same time. Ron knew his own difficulties. He had only barely blocked Maxwell's attack. Even so, he still felt his chest tighten. In the impact just now, he had unavoidably been injured. The power of a casual attack from a god was actually so terrifying. Then, would he still be able to block the opponent's next attack? Ron felt goosebumps. When he really stood in front of the ancient dragon, Maxwell, he realized how terrifying his opponent's strength was. That casual attack was filled with extremely strong destructive power, and could even break through a domain. This was a god. A true god. In front of a god, the strength of a mortal was so laughable. He actually blocked it? Ron's strength was so strong that even the ancient dragon Maxwell was surprised. He grinned. "Not bad, you do have some strength." "Hee, this is more interesting." Maxwell let out a low roar. His figure paused, and suddenly pounced towards Ron. His huge limbs stepped on the ground, and every step he took forward left a deep footprint on the hard bluestone floor. "Quick! Protect Ron. Let's go together." The powerhouses in Noah's team also made their move at this time. Roar! With a loud roar that shook people's hearts, Firth and Beaumont both began to transform. Not long after, a huge dark dragon weighing dozens of tons and a huge beast like Beaumont appeared in the slaughterhouse-like hall. Although the hall was large, the huge dark dragon and Beaumont's bodies almost reached the ceiling of the hall. Frigga also transformed into a petite fairy dragon. Undine also took out her weapon, a dark green staff, and began to chant in a low voice. "Lightning descend." Frigga acted the fastest. She did not chant any incantations, and countless lightning bolts descended from the sky, forming a terrifying lightning field on the ground. Firth breathed out a strong corrosive dark dragon breath, which poured onto the primordious dragon's body. Beaumont's huge beast Hao-Chin also quickly followed. He stretched out his fist and fiercely smashed it on the ground, displaying the profound meaning of strength, shockwave. Noah's team launched an attack on the divine beast guarding Bartlow's prison, the primordious dragon Maxwell. Boom! 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 The concentrated attacks fell like raindrops, and terrifying explosions kept coming from Maxwell's side. Not long after, the smoke and dust that filled the sky completely engulfed his body. Good job. Kill him, let's fight it out with him." The attacks of Noah's team greatly boosted everyone's fighting spirit and aroused the fighting spirit hidden in everyone's hearts. The fighting spirit burned fiercely, and defeated cowardice and fear. All the adventurers picked up their weapons and joined the resistance camp. How can this be? Klein did not expect the scene in front of him. He did not expect that under the leadership of Ron, the powerhouses of the divine realm, who were like lambs, would charge at a god. And all of this was brought about by Ron. Without him taking the initiative to resist, the adventurers would not even have the courage to hold their weapons firmly. Chapter 794. Under Ron's lead, thousands of adventurers joined forces to resist. This caught Maxwell off guard, and the sudden attack stunned him. Asterisk boom. 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 Asterisk faced with the godlike Maxwell, the adventurers' eyes turned red. They used almost all of their strength, and concentrated attacks poured down like raindrops. Countless magic bullets, arrows, and all sorts of long-range attacks exploded on Maxwell's body, and the powerful shockwaves almost overturned the entire hall. Klein stood there in a daze. The words that Ron had said to him kept echoing in his mind. Are you willing to die standing, or are you willing to live kneeling? A cry from the bottom of your heart just to wake up a few people. Will I not die if I don't resist? The only difference is whether I die earlier or later. Is it worth it to kneel to the enemy just to extend my life by a few minutes? Klein kept thinking. At this moment there was finally a change in his expression. The cowardly expression from before had long disappeared, and was replaced by a determined expression. Confidence and fighting spirit seemed to have returned to him. Ron, this fellow, still can't stop worrying. Klein smiled bitterly. At this moment there was a swoosh, and a black object appeared in his palm. Looks like it's time to use it now. Klein muttered to himself, a murderous intent flashing in his eyes. In this world, all living creatures would explode with twice or even several times their combat power when they were forced into a desperate situation. This was no longer something that could be explained by theory. The situation before their eyes was the best explanation. However, in the natural world, could a herd of docile sheep defeat a ferocious lion with the advantage of numbers? The answer was no. At this moment there was a boom, and a green wave of light repelled all the attacks. Immediately after, a thunderous roar made everyone's ears ring. Ha ha! You weak dregs! You want to defeat the greatest guardian in the history of Bartlow's prison with this bit of power? You're too naive. Maxwell leaped with his forelegs, and his huge body rose up quickly, leaving his original position. Then, with a boom, he landed heavily on the ground. The cruel, ferocious, and terrifying ancient W.R.M. Maxwell appeared once again. His appearance was accompanied by a suffocating aura and that ugly, ferocious smile. The most frightening thing was that Maxwell did not even have a scratch on his body after that terrifying wave of attack. How is this possible? The reality before their eyes made all the adventurers feel as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. At this moment they truly felt the arrival of death. Maxwell's strength was too terrifying, so terrifying that no one could match him. At the very least, it wasn't something that God Realm experts like them could defeat. According to legends, only another God Realm expert could defeat a God Realm expert. All of you go to hell. The attack just now had completely infuriated Maxwell. He waved his single-edged machete and crazily slashed at the adventurers like he was chopping vegetables. For a moment, the nightmare played out again. Run, don't kill me, save me. Under Maxwell's attack, the adventurers scattered in all directions. The confidence that they had just built up crumbled like sand. 1, 2, 3 large batches of adventurers fell into pools of blood. Every time Maxwell waved his machete, one or several adventurers would lose their lives. In just a few breaths, hundreds of adventurers had died. At this moment, Maxwell's body was covered in blood, and he looked like a killing god. However, this blood belonged to the adventurers, and he had not been injured from beginning to end. We can't let this go on. Ron clenched his teeth and waved his dragon bone staff, chanting an incantation. Come out, Skeleton Emperor! The summoning space array kept changing, and under everyone's astonished gazes, the huge Skeleton Emperor's body slowly descended. No, not just one, but 3. The arrival of 3 skeleton emperors brought with them a dense aura of death. It was said that every skeleton emperor was a powerful king when they were alive. Their subordinates were powerful armies that could fight well. Wherever the army pointed, millions of corpses would fall. At this time, the 3 skeleton emperors cast a summoning spell under Ron's instructions. Countless disgusting undead creatures were summoned and crazily attacked Maxwell. "It's you." After killing a few undead creatures, Maxwell quickly felt that something was wrong. He casually glanced around and quickly found Ron hiding at the side. He was also the first necromancer to take the initiative to resist him. Maxwell was surprised by Ron's youth and his strength that did not match his age. At this moment, he smiled slightly. "Hee, very good, interesting little guy. Since you're looking for death, then don't blame me for being impolite." After saying that, he raised his single-edged machete and approached Ron like an iron tower. Ron was shocked. "Skeleton Emperor, stop him for me. You think you can stop me with these skeletons? What a joke." Maxwell growled and waved his machete. Swish, swish, swish. With a few casual attacks, he chopped the skeleton emperors into pieces. Ron was stunned. He felt fear surging from the bottom of his heart. "Now it's your turn." Looking at Ron, who was no longer protected by the skeletons, Maxwell laughed sinisterly. He waved his machete and fiercely slashed at Ron. "Ron!" Firth and the others cried out in alarm. He roared and pounced at Maxwell. Maxwell laughed sinisterly. "Since you're in such a hurry to die, then I'll start with you." With that said, the blade turned and slashed at Firth, who was in the air. The single-edged machete raised a wave of blade and left a mark on the hard bluestone floor. Boom! After being hit by Maxwell, Firth let out a wail. His huge body fell heavily, and smoke and dust billowed. From his chest to his abdomen, a long gash was cut open, and blood splattered everywhere. Firth, Hao Qin, who had transformed into Beaumont, glared fiercely at Maxwell. His eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. "I'll fight it out with you," Hao Qin roared. He quickly rushed up, raised his fist, and used all the strength in his body, fiercely punched out. Shockwave! Bang! While Maxwell was distracted, Hao Qin heavily punched him in the chest, making a dull sound. "What?" At this time, Hao Qin's eyes suddenly opened wide. He felt as if his punch had hit an iron plate. The rebound caused his fist to hurt. Maxwell, on the other hand, was unscathed. What kind of defense was this? Hao Qin knew how powerful his punch was. Even Firth did not dare to take his punch head-on, but this Maxwell did not even move. Could this be the power of a god? Thinking of this, a hint of sorrow flashed in Hao Qin's eyes. The difference between a god's power and a mortal's was too great. Maxwell grinned. "Now it's my turn." After saying that, he suddenly punched out and heavily hit Hao Qin's stomach. Bang! Hao Qin didn't make a sound. The huge behemoth's body was sent flying and heavily crashed into a thick stone pillar in the hall. After crashing into the stone pillar, it still had to lean back. After crashing into several pillars in a row, it fell to the ground. After struggling for a while, it seemed that it couldn't move anymore. "Hao Qin!" Lord Hao Qin Noah's team cried out in alarm. Nature's high priestess Undine and fairy dragon Frigga were so shocked that their faces turned pale. Their bodies trembled, and they could not move. Maxwell's ferocity and tyranny had already scared them out of their wits. "You'd better worry more about yourself, necromancer boy." After clearing many obstacles, Maxwell said to Ron. As he spoke, the weapon in his hand was already greeting Ron. The single-edged broadsword mixed with divine power made a rumbling sound. "It's over." Without the protection of undead creatures, a necromancer's life was as fragile as a piece of paper. At this moment, Ron closed his eyes and waited for death in despair. "Stop!" At this moment, a shout came from not far away, stopping Maxwell's attack on Ron. Maxwell stopped what he was doing and frowned. It's you? What do you want now? Ron was lucky to have kept his life. He widened his eyes in shock, only to see that Klein had stood up at some point. He was holding a black stick in his hand and laughing coldly. Maxwell, take a look at what this is. As he spoke, he stretched out the thing in his hand. Klein was holding something that was about a foot long. It was completely black and looked like a spear or an arrow. The front end was sharp and the back was flat. It was engraved with complicated and mysterious patterns, and the black gem on top was dazzling. This is, Maxwell's heart skipped a beat. He only felt that the thing in the other party's hand was somewhat familiar, as if it was something that could threaten him. God-slaying arrow? Maxwell cried out in surprise. He did not expect the other party to have a God-slaying arrow. How did you get this thing? The God-slaying arrow in Klein's hand was a real divine weapon. The power of this divine weapon was said to be able to kill God. Because of this, the God-slaying arrow was extremely precious. Even in the main plane, it was something that money might not be able to buy. What was different from ordinary divine weapons was that the God-slaying arrow was a one-time use item. It only needed to be used once, and this priceless divine weapon would no longer exist. Before coming to Bartlow's prison, Klein had obtained a God-slaying arrow through various means. This was also the biggest reason why he dared to break into Bartlow's prison. This God-slaying arrow was specially used to deal with Maxwell. At this moment, Klein finally decided to use it. Klein's body rose higher and higher. A trace of death god energy flowed out from his hand and slowly wrapped around the God-slaying arrow. The God-slaying arrow frantically absorbed the death god energy, and its dark body became brighter and brighter. The God-slaying arrow was a divine weapon, and could only be driven by divine energy. Any type of divine energy could be used, and ordinary energy was useless against the God-slaying arrow. A strong aura of death filled the entire space. At this moment, Klein had already risen into the air. His body transformed into a skeleton-like death god. He grinned maliciously, revealing sharp fangs in his mouth. No, Maxwell finally panicked. He desperately waved his hands. You stop. Little guys. Everything can be discussed. It's too late. Klein's gaze was cold. Maxwell, you will pay the price for your arrogance. Chapter 795. Get down. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the God-slaying arrow shot towards Maxwell at lightning speed. In an instant there was a loud boom, and the heavens and earth shook. In the center of the circle where Maxwell was standing, a huge shock wave spread outwards like a huge storm. Everywhere it went, everything was destroyed. The adventurers all retreated, and even Ron was no exception. He forcefully put up a defensive skill, but he was forced back hundreds of meters. The powerful divine power spread in all directions, and in just a few minutes, the originally sturdy hall began to collapse. After the storm, it was a mess. The collapsed hall turned into ruins, and only a few stone pillars still stood proudly. The adventurers were buried under the ruins. Crash! Finally, someone quietly poked their head out from the ruins and scanned the surroundings with frightened eyes. Is he dead? Ron asked. He's dead, Klein said with certainty, standing on a tall stone pillar with a cold and arrogant expression. Klein had reason to be confident. The God-slaying arrow was a true divine weapon. The power of a divine weapon coupled with divine power was not inferior to a god's full-strength attack. Under such a terrifying attack, even a god would not have a chance to survive. Is that so? At this moment, the sudden voice made everyone's hair stand on end. It was unknown when Maxwell had stood up, but his bell-like eyes were glaring at him. There was a bone-chilling coldness in his eyes. Unfortunately, I've disappointed you. What? Klein's pupils shrank, and he stared at the ferocious Maxwell in disbelief. At this moment, he could not believe his eyes. What? He's not dead? Everyone was shocked, and then fear surged in their hearts again. In reality, the god-slaying arrow that Klein had used divine power of death to drive had caused Maxwell some damage. At this moment, his left chest was badly mutilated, revealing a bowl-sized wound. The flesh on the wound kept squirming, looking extremely terrifying. Klein took a step back in shock, his face pale, and his teeth chattering uncontrollably. How is this possible? Maxwell's face was filled with malevolence. His entire body was trembling, and his chest was heaving up and down. It was obvious that he was extremely furious. Maxwell's anger did not come from his injuries, but from his dignity. A high and mighty deity had actually been injured by someone who only had the strength of a divine realm. This was no less than a direct slap to his face. This was the greatest humiliation he had ever experienced since he was born. The god-slaying arrow was indeed a divine weapon that could kill Maxwell, but Klein seemed to have made a mistake. He had used far too little divine energy. He had only infused a sliver of death energy into the god-slaying arrow, and that amount of energy could only injure Maxwell, but it was far from enough to kill him. At this moment, Maxwell slowly raised his head, and a strong killing intent flashed in his eyes. He slowly raised his single-edged broadsword, and a green light instantly condensed. This broadsword's target was Klein. The green light from the broadsword turned into a crescent moon, and like a whirlwind, it shot towards Klein. With a loud boom, Klein's body flew out like a kite with a broken string, and landed heavily on the ground. Klein crawled up with difficulty and spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at his injuries and could not help but smile bitterly. Half of his body was badly mutilated, and one of his arms had flown off to who knows where. If he had not used a defensive skill to block it, he would have been dead by now. "Klein, are you all right?" Ron's spiritual sense was transmitted to his ear, and his tone was filled with concern. "I'm fine, I won't die yet." Klein's heart warmed as he replied. At this moment, he sighed, "But it's a pity. We're still going to die." At this moment, Maxwell took a step forward, the muscles on his face trembling in anger. How dare you injure me? You're all going to die. All of you are going to die." Maxwell's anger exploded in an instant, and at this moment, a huge green light suddenly expanded, enveloping the entire space. Green fire purgatory. In his rage, Maxwell used the god's domain. It was the same as the domain used by a divine realm expert. The difference was that this was a domain used by a god, and its power was much more terrifying than an ordinary god's domain. "Not good," he used the god's domain. An adventurer cried out in alarm. "We're finished," another adventurer said, his face full of despair. The moment the green light came into contact with the human body, it burned fiercely like a flame. Within the range of the god's domain, none of the adventurers were spared. The scorching green flames kept burning their bodies, making them feel as if they were in hell. The temperature of these green flames was extremely high, and the most terrifying thing was that these green flames could not be extinguished no matter what method was used. They could only use their own strength to resist, and when all their strength was used up, death would come. All the adventurers were burned to the point of rolling on the ground, crying out in pain. The weaker ones were instantly swallowed up by the green flames. "Ha ha! Not only am I going to kill you, I'm going to make you suffer endless torture before you die." Maxwell laughed loudly. He wanted to torture these innocent adventurers to vent the hatred in his heart. Ron clenched his teeth, enduring the attack of the green flames. He looked on helplessly as the adventurers beside him struggled, howled, and died in extreme pain, turning into scorched earth in a short while. At this moment Ron saw Klein. He was also holding on with his strong willpower. At this moment, his crippled limbs were constantly wriggling, occasionally letting out faint moans. It could be seen that he was also enduring extreme pain. Is this our final fate? A trace of sorrow flashed through Ron's heart. Gradually, the scene in front of his eyes became blurry, and he felt his soul force fading quickly. There was not much left. At this moment, he slowly closed his eyes. Ron, are you all right? At this moment, Ron's mind transmitted a weak spiritual sense. He frowned. Why was this voice so familiar? It's Frigga. You're not dead yet? Ron finally recognized the source of this voice, but he could no longer open his eyes, nor did he have any strength to reply. However, Frigga's spiritual sense continued to transmit. Ron, actually, I have a lot to say to you. I'm afraid that after today, I won't have the chance to say it anymore, Ron. You should know that since I was young, I was engaged to you, right? That's right. This is absolutely true. But when I gradually grew up and understood the huge gap between the human race and the dragon race, my heart slowly changed. Although I didn't say it, in fact, I had already abandoned this engagement. Not only that, I even used this engagement to reject other suitors. This brought you a lot of trouble. I know I'm very selfish. But, Ron, I'm sorry. The spiritual sense transmitted to his mind was intermittent. It could be seen that the owner of the spiritual sense was also suffering. Ron's heart violently beat. He didn't know Frigga's specific location. He quietly lay on the ground, enduring the attack of the green fire. But at this moment, he still didn't understand why Frigga would tell him this. At this moment, Frigga's spiritual sense transmitted again. I regret it very much. Really, Ron. Since I met you, your shadow always appeared in my mind. After knowing that you were married, I often felt inexplicably lost. Turns out I couldn't deceive myself. Maybe this is love. Fate is really wonderful, Ron. I love you, Frigga's voice slowly lowered. After she said this sentence, there was no more sound. Frigga, Ron was anxious. He shouted loudly, but there was no response from the spiritual sense he transmitted. Frigga, on Ron's cheeks, bean-sized tears slowly flowed down. Strong anger filled Ron's chest. His heart violently beat. Now he only had one thought left, and that was to avenge Frigga. I'm going to fight it out with him. However, there was only one thought left in Ron's mind. But at this moment, he didn't have any strength left. The green fire corroded his muscles, revealing his white bones everywhere. Besides his body, the green fire was also burning his soul. Under the attack of the green fire, Ron's spiritual sense began to collapse. Chapter 796. Boom! Ron felt a boom in his head, and then his mind went blank. Then, countless illusions appeared in front of his eyes one after another. Mountains of corpses, seas of blood, and countless skeletons piled up. The sky was gray and chaotic. Dream, this was a dream. Ron's first reaction was that he had entered a dream again. However, ever since Lord Noah had presented the events from 100,000 years ago to him, Ron had not entered this dream again. But why was this dream appearing now? Ron could not understand. No, this was not the same dream. Ron's heart skipped a beat. Only now did he understand that this was clearly two dreams. One dream was to reveal to Ron the scene of the Scourge Church's destruction 100,000 years ago, and Ron did not know what the other dream revealed. However, Ron was certain that these dreams and everything came from the ring on his finger, the soul ring. Ever since he obtained this ring, Ron would have some inexplicable dreams. This ring was accidentally obtained by Grandpa Ron, and even the ring's true owner, Grandpa Hamelin, did not know its origins. What is this? Ron, who was in the midst of chaos, took a few deep breaths and immediately felt refreshed. His entire body shook. He did not know that he was breathing in something called death energy. This death energy was very beneficial to necromancers. Ron only breathed for a while and felt that his strength had increased by several levels. Every pore on his body seemed to overflow with power. Ron immediately stopped absorbing the death energy. He sat down and began to digest the death energy that he had absorbed into his body. If he did not do so, Ron might be burst by this powerful force. The human body was like a container, and so was the soul. When one absorbed too much that did not belong to them, the body would explode. At this time, Ron suddenly thought of something. He extended his hand, and with a whoosh, a small black thread appeared in his palm, gently pulsing. Ron's eyes suddenly opened wide. Obviously, he recognized the thing in his hand. It was the divine energy of death that he hadn't seen in a long time. What's going on? Why would the divine energy of death appear here? Ron stared at the divine energy of death in his hand, dumbfounded. At this moment, he seemed to have comprehended something. According to what Klein said, the so-called divine power is the law, and the law is the realm. Now that I am in this realm, I can produce divine power. Ron lowered his head and looked at the divine power of death in his hand. This is the power of laws. The laws were the power that governed the operation of the world. Heaven, earth, wind, thunder, water, fire, life, death, and so on all had their own operation method. It was these various operation methods that were put together to form the entire world. Gods, on the other hand, were people who controlled certain laws between heaven and earth. No, perhaps they couldn't be called people, because they were another kind of life form, a more noble life form. Even a magic beast, after controlling the power of laws, would be different from ordinary magic beasts, becoming a legendary divine beast. And what Ron could control was one of the laws between heaven and earth, the law of death. A life form, from birth to death, was a natural process of evolution. Once one grasped the laws of this process, they would naturally grasp the essence of the power of death. Ron held the divine energy of death in his hand, and the fighting spirit that came from the bottom of his heart once again burned fiercely. He wanted to take revenge for Frigga. Maxwell's mouth had a trace of a cruel smile. He looked at those adventurers desperately struggling in the cyan fire purgatory, and his heart was filled with the joy of revenge. At this moment, Maxwell frowned. He saw a figure that wasn't very tall slowly standing up from the ruins. It was Ron. His body was burning with green flames, and the flames had already corroded most of his body, revealing his eerie white bones. From afar, he looked like a skeleton. How is this possible? This necromancer can still stand up? Maxwell's eyes widened, and a trace of surprise appeared on his face. At this moment, Klein regained some consciousness. He raised his head, and could not help but be shocked when he saw Ron's figure. How is this possible? Ron, he still has power? I'm going to kill you. Ron seemed to slowly raise his head, and said word by word. His eyes were green, and his face was filled with a sinister smile. He looked very crazy. You! When Maxwell heard this, he could not help but laugh involuntarily. It's not that I'm looking down on you, little necromancer. Even if you cultivate for 1,000 years, it'll be very impressive if you can reach half my strength, Maxwell said with a faint smile, and a trace of contempt appeared in his eyes. Ron chuckled a few times, but did not reply. At this moment, he slowly raised his right hand, and not long after, a green ball of air began to condense. What? Maxwell's expression finally changed. He noticed that the power emitted from the other party's body was actually the divine energy of death. A bone spear appeared in Ron's hand. This bone spear was infused with a large amount of divine power of death. An ordinary bone spear underwent a complete transformation under the infusion of divine power of death. That's right, it was the spear of death. Ron laughed sinisterly, and the spear of death was suddenly thrown out. Boom! The divine energy of death and Maxwell's collided, and for a moment the heavens fell and the earth cracked. Divine energy burned the horizon, forming a huge energy vortex. Death coil. Ron's hands constantly changed as he chanted an incantation, and another green ball of air instantly formed. The death coil, that was filled with the divine energy of death, was even more terrifying. Countless skeletons were released, screaming and wailing in the air, as if they wanted to devour all living creatures. Countless flying skeletons quickly gathered, and at the same time, they were like thousands of threads that wrapped around Maxwell. The death coil, that was filled with the divine energy of death, was 100 times stronger than before. Damn it! It's actually a soul attack. Maxwell cursed as he used his divine energy to disperse Ron's soul coil. The two exchanged several hundred moves, but Ron did not back down. His divine energy seemed endless, and every skill he used was filled with a large amount of divine energy. In Maxwell's eyes, Ron was like a god of death who could use the divine energy of death. Even if he was a god realm expert who could use divine energy was an existence that could not be underestimated. After the battle between Maxwell and Ron began, the green flames purgatory stopped, and the green flames around the adventurers disappeared, giving them a chance to catch their breath. What's going on? How can Ron have so much divine energy of death? Could it be? Watching Ron's performance, Klein was shocked. To be able to use the divine energy of death so skillfully, this showed that Ron had already reached a certain realm. Although his strength was still at mid-level god realm, his realm was infinitely close to that of a god, and was called the demigod realm. Experts at this realm could even defeat peak god realm experts. So that's how it is, he has already entered the demigod realm. If he encountered that green-clothed warden again, he would no longer be Ron's opponent. Increasing one's strength was not an easy matter, but increasing one's realm was even more difficult. With Ron's age, he could definitely be called a genius. Who would have thought that Ron had also reached this realm? Klein sighed, then shook his head. Unfortunately, this realm is unable to fight against Maxwell, absolutely impossible. In Klein's eyes, although Ron had grasped a portion of the law of death, this law of death was incomplete. Facing a true god like Maxwell, defeat was only a matter of time. I'm going to kill him, kill him. Ron desperately used all of his strength and launched an attack on Maxwell without any regard for the consequences. The divine power of death was unleashed as if it was free. After the initial panic, Maxwell gradually calmed down and began to counterattack. Ron's body was severely injured, and even his bones were exposed. He was barely holding on with one breath. At this time, Ron began to panic. Even if he could use the divine energy of death, his injured body could not hold on for much longer. If his body could not hold on, then what was the use of having strength? Damn it, I'll fight it out with him. Ron's figure suddenly leaped into the air, both hands stretched out, his mouth chanting an incantation. At this moment, he was going to fight with his life on the line. A huge black hand covered the sky, carrying a powerful divine energy aura. It was as if a demon god had descended, its power terrifying. Rumble, the entire space began to vibrate, accompanied by an ear-piercing sound. Within the shadow of the hand, black gas continued to spread. This black gas was extremely corrosive. No matter what it was, once it came into contact with the black gas, it would instantly turn into meat powder. Come on! Maxwell shouted loudly. He swung his single-edged broadsword in a circle, and then a green blade of light suddenly swung out. Break for me! Boom! There was an earth-shattering sound. Under Maxwell's green saber light, Ron's death hand quickly melted. Not good. Klein's heart sank. At this moment, he knew that Ron was finished. The powerful force rebounded onto Ron, and Ron only felt a sweet taste in his throat. Pfft! He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his thin and weak body fell straight down. Although Ron had broken through, he only had the strength of a demigod. Although he could not defeat Maxwell, he had still made him go through some twists and turns. Haha! This guy is really troublesome. After taking care of Ron, Maxwell smiled and strode forward. Every step he took caused the ground to shake. What do I do? At this moment, Klein was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. His eyes swept around, and at this moment, his heart skipped a beat as he saw something familiar. Got it. Klein was delighted. He glanced at Maxwell, gritted his teeth, and with a pring, his body turned into a cloud of black mist and disappeared. Maxwell's back was facing Klein, so he did not see Klein's actions. At this moment, Maxwell had already walked to Ron's side and calmly looked at Ron, who had fallen to the ground. Although Ron's injuries were serious, he was not dead yet. He slowly raised his head, his eyes filled with stubbornness. Maxwell smiled. Although you are very strong, you are far from being my match. To be able to fight me to this extent is enough for you to be proud. With that, he paused and slowly raised the broadsword in his hand. Now go to hell! Stop! A shout came from not far away. On the other side of the hall, Klein's body was tightly pressed against the wall. At this moment, his clothes were tattered and his body was covered in wounds. He looked very miserable, but his right hand was pressing on a protruding semicircular mechanism on the wall. His eyes were fixed on Maxwell, revealing a trace of madness. Maxwell, what do you think this is? What? Maxwell was stunned. He turned around and glanced at Klein. Then, his gaze fell on the mechanism that Klein's right hand was pressing on, and his expression changed drastically. Chapter 797. Let's talk this out. Don't touch this thing. Maxwell panicked as well and hurriedly said, Necromancer brat? No. My dear Lord Necromancer. Don't do anything rash. Let's talk this out. Let's talk this out. Maxwell heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Klein stop. He quickly calmed down. How about this? As long as you don't touch this thing, you can leave immediately. I won't make things difficult for you, what? Ron could not believe his ears when he heard that. When did Maxwell become so easy to talk to? At this moment, Ron's eyes landed on the mechanism in Klein's hand. He thought that it must be something extraordinary for Maxwell to be so wary of it. But what exactly was that thing? It could make Maxwell lower his proud head, and even lower his head to a mere necromancer. At this moment, Maxwell was in a dilemma. If he had a choice, why would a proud mythical beast like him lower his head to a mortal? However, the thing the other party was holding was something that could take his life. If he really activated that mechanism, Maxwell did not dare to think further. Really? We can leave now? You can let me use the interplanar teleportation portal? Klein said nonchalantly, but his hand did not leave that black mechanism for even a moment. Of course. You can all leave now. I promise in the name of God. I won't do anything to you. You can use the interplanar teleportation portal. Really? We can finally leave? Maxwell had slaughtered all the way until now, and there were only about 100 adventurers left. They dragged their heavily injured bodies, and when they heard Maxwell's promise, their eyes lit up with hope. These people did not dare to be enemies with Maxwell. Being able to leave safely was their greatest hope. Is that so? That's great. Lord Maxwell, you can keep your word. Klein seemed to believe Maxwell's words. A smile appeared on his face, and he moved his body half a step away. His fingers also slowly left that black mechanism. Of course, my words are divine. Of course they count. Yes. That's it. Now, slowly leave that thing. Maxwell's tone softened. He forced a smile on his ugly and hideous face, but he was incomparably depressed. As Klein's finger moved further and further away from the boot, Maxwell slowly changed, and a faint killing intent gradually condensed. As long as this guy is at a safe distance, kill him instantly. Maxwell thought to himself and secretly made up his mind. However, the smile on his face became even more sincere. Maxwell was the guardian of Bartlos prison and a powerful god. Even if he went back on his word, no one could do anything to him. As for these adventurers, so what if they died? No one would seek justice for them. At that moment, Ron was behind Maxwell, dragging his heavily injured body and lying on the ground. He looked at everything in front of him. At that moment, he saw Maxwell's hand behind his back. That hand was holding the single-edged broadsword, and that little finger was trembling faintly. Ron understood that this was a signal that Maxwell was about to make a move. Ron struggled to raise his head and shook it at Klein. In just a moment, Klein's hand reached out like lightning and pressed on that fatal black mechanism again, grinning maliciously. "Sir Maxwell, do you think I'll still believe your words? Since you're so afraid of him, let him out." Without waiting for Maxwell to react, he abruptly twisted the black mechanism. The magic array in the room instantly stopped working. Then, zap, zap, zap. There was an ear-piercing sound of the mechanism, as if a heavy door to hell had been opened. In an instant, the entire Bartlos prison shook. "What's going on? What's going on?" "He seems to have activated something." The adventurers who were lucky enough to survive panicked. The unknown was the most terrifying. They did not know what was going on, nor did they know what they were about to face. The tremors grew stronger and stronger, and the ground slowly cracked open. Countless gases shot out from the cracks, and the entire hall was in chaos. Maxwell's face was extremely pale at that moment. He pointed at Klein, unable to say anything. He, who had always been ferocious and arrogant, was now panicking. Ron tried his best to crawl forward, avoiding the huge rocks that fell. At that moment, he saw that in another huge room in the hall behind him, space was collapsing. Huge stone pillars kept falling due to some kind of force, and the black sphere floating in the sky was shaking. A small crack slowly extended and split open, and within it, a terrifying aura seeped through the distant space and spread out. Ron felt as if his entire body had been struck by lightning. He was stunned on the spot. The powerful aura that seeped out from the crack in space was like water that could penetrate every pore, penetrating straight to the bottom of his heart. It was different from Maxwell's ferocious and violent aura. This terrifying aura that came out of nowhere was filled with arrogance and coldness. It was as if a high and mighty noble was unreservedly displaying his elegance. The black sphere was very sturdy, and the imprisoned noble was impatient. He began to hit the sphere with all his might, causing the crack to widen even more. Boom! There was a loud sound that seemed to come from the heavens. Not only the black sphere, but the powerful force caused the entire Bartlos prison to shake. The ashes on the walls fell down, and the terrifying aura that was released swept through the entire hall like a whirlwind. Boom! There was another loud sound, and the black sphere that was suspended high up in the air vibrated again. It cracked open, becoming bigger and bigger. "You actually released this demon." At some point, Maxwell was holding a single-edged broadsword and standing in front of Klein. At that moment, his expression was very ugly. Is that so? Cough, cough, cough. That's great." The heavily injured Klein coughed a few times, and blood slowly flowed out from the corner of his mouth. At that moment, he calmly looked at Maxwell. His face did not reveal the fear of death, but excitement and joy. "Maxwell, are you finally afraid?" Ha. Klein's voice became softer. As he spoke, he slowly fell to the ground. Facing Maxwell's broadsword, a smile appeared on his face. "Sir, I finally did it. Awaken, sir. You will be reborn once again. Lead us to take back everything that once belonged to you." Boom! There was a loud sound, and the black sphere finally cracked open. Following that, a powerful aura suddenly burst out. In an instant, a powerful airflow filled the entire space. The heavens and earth trembled, and the entire Bartlos prison shook. Roar! Suddenly, a loud noise rang out, as if it was a cry from hell. In that instant, everyone's heartbeat stopped. Following that, in the sky above Bartlos prison, a huge and terrifying black shadow slowly appeared. Everyone trembled under the terrifying aura of this black shadow. This black shadow looked like a huge monster. Its entire body was snow-white, and its upper body was similar to a human's. It had 2 thick arms, and its lower body had no legs. Instead, it had a long snake-like tail, like a huge chain that connected the heavens and the earth. It constantly twisted and wriggled. On its back there were 6 huge wings. The hard wings were as sharp as knives. When the 6 wings spread open, the terrifying black shadow covered the sky. The huge monster was expressionless, and a pair of arrogant azure eyes overlooked the earth. It was filled with the feeling of a king looking down on the world. What kind of monster is this? Its strength is actually so strong? Ron's mouth was wide open, and he could not speak for a long time. It was as if his entire body had fallen into an abyss. This aura, this power, it was really too strong. Ron could not think of any words to describe what he was feeling. It was a kind of trembling that came from the bottom of his heart. Heavens! Klein, what kind of thing did you release? Uda-Lezi, Sky Dragon. At this time, an adventurer not far from Ron finally recognized the identity of this monster. At this moment, his face was pale, his hands and feet were trembling, and his teeth could not help but chatter. He's Sky Dragon Uda-Lezi, Uda-Lezi? Heavens! How could it be him? He was released. What? Ron was shocked. He's the commander of the Red Silk Army, Uda-Lezi, who was imprisoned in Bartlos prison. The terrifying figure who caused a huge wave of blood in the main plain 100,000 years ago. Ever since Ron was born, he had never encountered such a powerful creature. Like Maxwell, Uda-Lezi was also a divine beast. He also had divine power, and was even more powerful than Maxwell. Sky Dragon. The dark dragon Are Firth trembled and clenched his teeth, trying his best not to kneel. The Sky Dragon was Uda-Lezi's true body. It was a super creature that only lived in the legends of dragons. It was the highest king among dragons. It had the majesty of a king, and its powerful aura made the dark dragon Are Firth have no choice but to bow his head. The peerless king among dragons, Sky Dragon Uda-Lezi, after being imprisoned for 100,000 years, had finally escaped from Bartlos prison. Taking a deep breath, Ron slowly recovered from his shock. He glanced at Klein, who was not far away, and his gaze focused. Strange, how did he know to open the mechanism that imprisoned Uda-Lezi? Ron did not know Klein's goal, and he did not know whether releasing this divine beast that was 10,000 times more terrifying than Maxwell was a good thing or a bad thing for them. Chapter 798. Boom. Boom. Boom, as the ground shook, Maxwell's huge body swayed and disappeared at the end of the corridor in an instant. Similarly, the terrifying Sky Dragon's aura disappeared at the same time, as if it had never appeared, and the sky became clear again. That fellow is finally gone. Seeing that the crisis was over, the surviving adventurers heaved a sigh of relief. Back then, more than 100,000 adventurers entered Bartlos prison, but now there were less than 100 who could truly leave. Thinking of their companions who had been killed by Maxwell, some of the adventurers could not help but shed tears. Ron struggled to get up, but after taking 2 steps, he fell to the ground again. The injuries on his body were too severe. Suddenly, Ron only felt a flash of light in front of his eyes, and in just a moment, the injuries on his body were as good as new. He turned back to look, but it was an adventurer he did not know, a shadow priest. "Thank you," Ron thanked him sincerely. "You're welcome," that shadow priest hurriedly waved his hand, his face full of gratitude as he stuttered, "If it wasn't for you, perhaps we would already be dead." The surviving adventurers began the rescue operation. No one took the lead, and no one organized it. They were all silently doing what they had to do, using healing spells and health potions to rescue those adventurers who were on the verge of death from the embrace of the Grim Reaper. Right, Frigga. Thinking of Frigga, Ron became anxious. At this time, a familiar voice entered his ears. Ron. Ron turned back to look, and saw Frigga walking quickly towards him. After being treated by those adventurers, her condition was much better than Ron's, but she looked a little dispirited. Frigga, Ron suddenly pounced over, and the two of them hugged each other tightly. After a while, they reluctantly separated. When her gaze met with Ron's, Frigga blushed and lowered her head. Did you hear what I said just now? I heard. Ron was stunned and nodded honestly. You're naughty. Frigga was extremely shy and raised her fist as if she was about to hit him. Cough, cough. The sound of coughing could be heard. Firth and Hao Qin had arrived at some point in time. When they saw this scene, they could only pretend that they did not see it. Lord R.A. Firth. Lord Hao Qin, are both of you all right? That's great. Ron was surprised to see the two of them and shouted in surprise. I'm fine, I won't die yet. Firth smiled and looked at Hao Qin. However, when he saw the faint smile on Hao Qin's face, he blushed and immediately looked away. Where is High Priestess Undine? Frigga looked left and right, looking for Undine. I'm here. Undine stuck out a hand from the ruins and waved at them. Pulling Firth and Hao Qin, they quickly ran over and helped Undine up from the ruins. Only then did Ron heave a sigh of relief, a smile on his face. Swish, swish. At the end of the stone bridge that connected to the Bartolo's prison, circles of light lit up one after another. Then, those people disappeared. Those frightened people fled as fast as they could. They didn't want to stay in this damned place for even a moment longer. At this time, the other divine necromancer Klein was also rescued by the other adventurers. He was supported by someone as he limped over. That person brought Klein to Ron's side and bowed to him before turning to leave. Frigga and the others looked at each other and tactfully nodded before leaving at the same time. They knew that the two of them must have something to say. The two of them looked at each other for a long time and fell into silence. They did not know what to say. At this time, Klein smiled. Fortunately, we all survived. Yes, we all survived. Ron could not help but sigh. At this moment, he felt as if he had just survived a disaster. Along the way, they had encountered countless powerful enemies. It was no exaggeration to say that they could not defeat a single one of them. But in the end, they still survived. "Oh right, Klein, are you all right?" Ron asked with concern. Hee, I'm fine, Klein smiled. At this moment, he was covered in injuries. Even his clothes were damaged in many places. They were tattered beyond recognition, revealing his deathly pale skin. "Are you going back?" Klein asked. His eyes revealed a trace of reluctance. He glanced at Ron and said in a joking tone, "How about you don't go back to the Noah continent? Come back to the undead plane with me. This, I haven't considered it yet. If I think about it carefully, I will go." After the battle in Bartolo's prison, Ron lamented that his strength was too insignificant. How big was the Noah continent? It was only one of the countless secondary planes. The legendary undead plane was even more vast and great. Ron's heart could not help but waver. Perhaps the undead plane was worth a visit. "That's a pity," Klein said. He could not hide the disappointment on his face. As the adventurers left one after another, the destroyed hall seemed empty. The people who were lucky enough to survive had almost all left. Ron's gaze inadvertently swept over. At this time, he saw Klein's torn clothes on his shoulder, revealing a red thing. "What's that?" Ron's pupils shrank. He opened his eyes wide in surprise. A familiar red swastika symbol was reflected in his eyes. "That's the symbol of the Red Silk Army." In an instant, Ron felt as if he had been heavily punched. He stood there in a daze, his mind blank. Klein. He was a member of the Red Silk Army. That's right. He wrapped the red silk symbol in his clothes to hide his true identity. But why did he hide his identity? The Red Silk Army had committed all kinds of crimes. In order to achieve their evil goals, they had even destroyed many teleportation points, leaving everyone with no choice but to enter the dangerous Bartolo's prison and face the powerful primordial guards, as well as the primordial dragon Maxwell, who was 10,000 times more terrifying than the primordial guards. This was the reason why Klein had been hiding his identity. At this time, Ron suddenly thought of something and his whole body trembled. So, that matter was like this. I understand. Ron stared at Klein. In an instant, he made up his mind. Klein frowned. What's wrong, Ron? You seem a little unwell? Ron, before Ron could reply, Frigga, who was talking to Undine and the others, ran over in a panic. She ran in front of Ron and Klein and anxiously said, Ron, look, something happened in the Noah continent again. As she spoke, she extended the telepathic necklace in her hand in front of Ron. The necklace in Frigga's hand shone brightly, the light illuminating the surroundings. The telepathic necklace was connected to the user's mind. The more anxious the user was, the brighter the light the necklace emitted. Ron immediately took out the telepathic necklace and looked. His necklace was the same. It seemed that something really did happen in the Noah continent, and it was a big matter. Ron, we must hurry back. Frigga grabbed Ron's hand. Ron, if you have something to do, then hurry back. Klein echoed. No, I can't go. Chapter 799. As soon as he said this, not only were Frigga, R.A., Firth, and the others shocked, but even Klein was stunned. Why? Everyone's eyes widened as they asked in confusion. Why? Ron smiled coldly and glanced at Klein. Ask him. Me? Klein frowned. Does this have anything to do with me? Of course. Ron turned around and there was no smile on his face. He stared intently at Klein and said word by word, Then please tell me, dear Mr. Klein, how did Pamir die? Ron's words were like a bolt from the blue, shocking everyone. Klein's expression immediately stiffened. Frigga's eyes widened as she looked at the two of them in disbelief. She then looked at Klein and stammered, Is this true? Ron, it seems that you have misunderstood me. In just an instant Klein's face regained its calmness. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and he paused, spread out his hands, and put on an innocent expression. Ron, you actually think that I killed Pamir? Besides, he's just a powerhouse from the sacred domain. What good would it do me to kill him? Klein's words were reasonable, and everyone's confidence in Ron began to waver. Frigga also said hesitantly, Ron, are you mistaken? I'm not mistaken. Ron sneered and took out something from his arms. He said loudly, Klein, look at what this is. As he spoke, he raised the thing in his hand high. The thing in Ron's hand was something that looked like a strip of red and white cloth. It was obvious that this thing was incomplete, as if it had been forcibly torn in half from the middle. The moment he saw the thing in Ron's hand, Klein's heart sank, and his expression became somewhat unnatural. This was found in Pamir's hands. Pamir had been holding this thing tightly before he died, Ron said as he waved the strip of cloth in his hand. He glanced at Klein and continued, As everyone can see, this thing is incomplete. I didn't know what it was at first, but Ron paused and smiled. When I saw what Klein was hiding in his clothes, I knew what it was. Am I right, Mr. Klein? What is that? Frigga asked. The Red Silk Army. Ron's eyes narrowed slightly, exuding a faint murderous intent. What? The Silk Army? Everyone was shocked. Frigga took a step back in shock, staring at Klein in disbelief. At this time, everyone's gaze pierced through the torn clothes on Klein's shoulder. Sure enough, they saw a red and white swastika armband. You're a member of the Red Silk Army? The situation instantly became tense, and the atmosphere dropped to the freezing point. After a brief moment of shock, Firth, Hao Qin, and the others were secretly on guard. It was the Red Silk Army who had destroyed all the strongholds, and they were also the culprits who had caused everyone to fall into such a state. That's right, I am a member of the Red Silk Army and I was the one who killed Pamir. After a round of silence, Klein finally admitted this matter. He raised his head slightly and looked at Ron, his once kind face turning cold. So what? Do you even need to say it? Ron's eyes were fixed on Klein, unwilling to back down. I want to avenge Pamir. Avenge? Klein sneered. Do you think you have the ability to do so? Ron. Frigga swallowed hard, hesitating for a moment before saying, You. Don't forget that something serious has happened on the Noah continent. Should we? Frigga's feelings were very complicated. She knew what Ron was thinking, but she did not want him to go against Klein. Firstly, Klein's strength was unfathomable, and Ron might not be his match. Secondly, it was not worth it to clash with a powerhouse of the celestial realm for the sake of an ordinary powerhouse of the sacred domain. However, Ron did not think so. To him, Pamir was his friend who had saved his life, even though he was not very strong. If his friend was killed and he just walked away, with Ron's personality, how could he let the murderer go? Thinking of the trouble the Noah continent was facing, Ron still hesitated. You guys go back first. I'll come back after I've settled things here. Frigga was still hesitating, but she pulled Firth away. All right, we'll go back first. Ron, take care. After saying that, she took a deep look at Ron and Klein before striding away. Frigga was pulled away by Firth. Before she left, she looked at Ron reluctantly. Whoosh, 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 several rings of light lit up, and apart from Ron, everyone in the Noah continent team disappeared into the spatial transmission array. The circle of light disappeared, and the light dimmed. In the hall that had been destroyed to the point of a lake, everyone had left. Only Ron and Klein were left. The huge temple appeared somewhat empty. Both of them were silent, and the atmosphere was stifling. I didn't expect you to find out. Klein was the first to break the silence. He raised his head slightly, and there was no expression on his face. But, do you really want to avenge that goblin? Ron nodded and said in a low voice, Yes, because he's my friend. Am I not your friend? Klein followed up with another question. But Pamir doesn't have the strength nor the motive. Ron had made up his mind, and his tone was very tough. But I don't understand. Even if you're a member of the Red Silk Army, why did you have to kill this goblin who posed no threat to you? Because he's too smart, Ron. You have to know that smart people don't live long. Klein raised his eyebrows, his eyes full of provocation. At this moment, he had let go of all his scruples. He knew something I didn't want others to know, so I killed him. I understand now. Ron was silent for a long time. He stretched out his arms slightly, his back straight, and his face expressionless, but he couldn't suppress the burning anger in his eyes. He slowly took out his weapon. Your secret probably has something to do with the leader of the Red Silk Army, Utaris, who is imprisoned in Bartlos prison. That's right, but unfortunately you all found out too late. Lord Utaris has already been released from prison, and the Red Silk Army will once again be reborn, Klein said slowly. At this time, his hand slowly lowered, and not long after, a black nether snake staff appeared in his palm. At this moment, both of them understood that this battle was inevitable. This situation wasn't what Ron wanted. From another point of view, Klein was both a teacher and a friend to him. He gave him pointers on many things regarding cultivation, which made him feel enlightened and solved many problems, and benefited greatly. However, Ron had his own principles, and these principles wouldn't waver because of Klein. Come! Klein sneered, and the bone staff in his hand drew an arc. The curtains to the showdown between the divine magi had finally begun. Pung, pung. Almost at the same time, Klein and Ron's bodies turned into black fog, and they instantly disappeared. Necromancers had weak physiques, and they didn't have powerful defensive abilities. The only thing they could do was hide their bodies as much as possible and use skeletons and other undead creatures to fight for them. Ka, 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 the tangible soil began to harden. White skulls drilled out of the ground that had hardened into purple chunks. These undead received the call of the law and traveled through countless spacetime to arrive at the battlefield of the two undead divine magi in prison Bartolos. Kill. A terror knight waved the long blade in his hand and blew the horn to attack. Countless necromancers rushed forward like a tide. They were brave, fierce, and fearless. However, their enemies were also a group of undead, brave, fierce, and fearless. Boom! 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 Countless skeletons, ghouls, gargoyles, dark knights, and other undead creatures fiercely collided with each other, and a great battle broke out. A skeleton hero waved the axe in his hand and chopped off the head of a skeleton warrior, but it was pulled into the air by a gargoyle. A few ghouls had just dismembered a zombie and eaten it, but they were blasted into meat powder by a skeleton archmage's magic in the blink of an eye. The battle between undead creatures was even more fierce and cruel. At this moment, their masters, Ron and Klein, were nowhere to be seen. Perhaps they had hidden their bodies, or perhaps they had transformed into undead creatures, hiding in the darkness and secretly watching everything. An endless stream of undead creatures were summoned, and the number of undead creatures summoned by both sides had already exceeded several 100,000. This was just the number of undead creatures that the two divine magi could casually summon. In all the previous planar wars, the number of undead creatures was often the most terrifying of all the participating parties. Even if it was a battle with extremely different tactics, the undead side would often throw in an undead army numbering in the hundreds of millions. That vast ocean of undead, their way of attacking like a tide, was enough to make any opponent tremble in fear. Klein and Ron were both geniuses of the undead world. Even in the main plane of the undead, they were top-notch existences. The battle between the two of them was difficult to distinguish. The best way to hide a grain of sand was to hide in the desert. At this moment, Ron was doing this. He had transformed into an ordinary skeleton warrior, hiding in this sea of skeletons. He was completely unremarkable. His pitch-black eyes were looking around, looking for traces of Klein. This was a relatively basic skill of necromancers, skeleton incarnation. Skeleton incarnation allowed necromancers to transform into ordinary skeletons. Not only their appearance, but their aura and demeanor were all concealed, making them look no different from an ordinary skeleton. This was also something that Ron had learned from Klein. It was a relatively low-level skill, but necromancy had been passed down to the Noah continent. Ron didn't know how to use it, and even Homelin didn't know about the existence of skeleton incarnation in low-level necromancy. Ron knew that Klein was definitely hiding in this sea of skeletons. Perhaps he had transformed into a skeleton warrior, or perhaps he had transformed into a gargoyle, overlooking everything from the sky. This was the unique fighting style of necromancers. Just as Ron was looking around for Klein's figure, a voice entered his ears. "Haha, Ron, give up. This kind of battle is meaningless." Ron turned his head to see Klein in his black robe, standing in the sky with an arrogant expression. The red silk armband on his arm was bright and eye-catching. Ron sneered. "What? You don't want to hide anymore?" "There's no need." Klein faintly smiled. "I already said that this kind of battle is meaningless. You and I have an incomparably vast soul force. If we summon these low-level undead to fight, who knows how long it will take. My time is precious, I don't have the time to waste with you." Utaris had awakened and the Red Silk Army had been revived. Klein had too many things to do. He had no choice but to fight with Ron, but wasting time here was absolutely not worth it. "Oh, you can't keep your cool?" Ron cracked a smile, revealing a row of snow-white teeth, the fighting spirit in his eyes growing stronger. "That's not it." Chapter 800. Klein emerged from the hundreds of thousands of skeletons and said that Ron was no match for him. Of course, this was not empty talk, because he had been hiding his strength all this time. Is that so? Ron laughed coldly. With a wave of his hand, he cancelled the skeleton transformation skill and appeared from the skeletons, meeting Klein's gaze. What makes you think you can? With my strength. Klein stood in the sky, quietly looking down at Ron. His eyes revealed a trace of pity, like a high and mighty expert looking at an insignificant and pitiful worm. Perhaps you don't know, but from the beginning to the end, I've been hiding my true strength. Do you think my strength is similar to yours? Or that I'm a little stronger than you? Wrong. You're very wrong. Klein shook his head and took a step forward. In an instant, a powerful aura burst forth from his body, like an invisible pressure that filled the entire space. As if the shackles on his body had been removed, his strength suddenly exploded, and his level began to rise. What? Even Ron could not help but be moved by this huge change. Klein's strength had actually reached the peak of the divine realm. The peak of the divine realm was practically half a step into the divine realm, the same level as the green-clothed warden, and possibly even stronger. Klein had indeed hidden his strength. Ever since he had entered Bartlos prison, even when facing his strongest enemy, the ancient dragon Maxwell, and even when facing death, he had forcefully restrained himself, not revealing his true strength. Of course, in front of Maxwell, this little bit of strength was not enough. However, after Eutarus's return and the Red Silk Army was reborn, Klein no longer had any misgivings. He still had many things to do, and the most important thing was to defeat Ron. No matter what, today I will defeat you and avenge Pamir. After seeing Klein's strength, Ron calmed down, his gaze becoming even more resolute, as if no one could shake his desire for revenge. Come on. Klein's face was expressionless. Ron, I will show you the true power of necromancy magic. Death Coil. Klein was the first to attack. With a wave of his hand, tens of thousands of threads shot out, transforming into countless ghosts that wrapped around Ron. As a sole attack, Death Coil was fully deserving of its name. Soul Devour. Ron opened his mouth wide and began devouring these Een spirit. To others, these Een spirits were a means of soul attacks, but to a necromancer, they were great nourishment. Hee, you actually devoured the Een soul I summoned. Not bad, not bad. I almost forgot that I was fighting an undead. Although Ron had dispelled the death entanglement, Klein didn't mind at all. He smiled and unleashed his domain. Sea of Dead Spirits. In an instant, the entire hall shook. With Klein's feet as the center, the earth hardened and quickly spread open. Countless undead wriggled through space and appeared on the 18th floor of Bartlos prison. At a glance, millions of undead were densely packed, occupying the entire hall. These undead were constantly roaring and howling, like an army returning from hell. The appearance of millions of undead brought a powerful resentment that soared into the sky, forming a huge dark cloud that shrouded the entire space. The power of the undead on Klein's side suddenly increased several times. Under the influence of the Sea of Dead Spirits, countless undead were born, surpassing Ron's in an instant. Among these undead, there were even high-level undead creatures, such as the Abyssal Bone Dragon, Frost Dragon, and even the Skeleton Sovereign. The emergence of these high-level undead creatures greatly strengthened the power of Klein's side. The duel between undead was more dangerous than the duel between undead and other powerhouses. This was because after the undead creatures were killed, their corpses would turn into clouds of black gas and disappear. This black gas was the most precious tonic for the undead on the other side. After absorbing the black gas, not only could they recover from their injuries, but their fighting strength would also become stronger. Compared with Klein, the undead on Ron's side were far inferior in both quantity and quality. Soon, they were swallowed up by Klein's undead. In the sky, hundreds of frost dragons were roaring. On the ground, under the leadership of the skeleton sovereign, countless undead army approached and surrounded Ron all of a sudden. Even if Ron could fly, at this time, he couldn't fly out. Undead calamity! In an instant, Ron also activated his domain. The powerful domain power was overwhelming, and countless undead were summoned to fight against the undead summoned by Klein. Like Klein, among the undead creatures summoned by Ron, there were also frost dragons, skeleton sovereigns, and other high-level creatures. Their appearance greatly strengthened the strength of Ron's side. The battle between the two undead was earth-shattering. The whole broken hall turned into a battlefield. The undead, who were not afraid of death, charged at each other, and the sound of killing shook the sky. In the confrontation between the two domains, Klein could not gain any advantage. Ron, now I'll let you see my real power. Klein's face was expressionless. Facing Ron, he no longer held back. Klein stretched out his hand, and a black thread appeared in his palm and quickly condensed. Divine power, containing the extremely powerful law of death. That's right, this was the divine power of death. Death Vortex. At this time, Klein made his move. A strong death aura was overwhelming, like a mountain pressing down, and a suffocating smell could be felt within 100 miles. A powerful vortex suddenly opened, like a huge black hole. Under the guidance of the divine power, it sucked in everything around it. Among the undead summoned by Ron, except for the powerful undead, the weak undead were sucked into the huge vortex. They were crushed into pieces, turned into a cloud of black gas, and disappeared. After absorbing the black gas, the death vortex became more fierce and powerful. Divine power? You actually used divine power? Ron frowned, but he was not surprised. You think you're the only one who has the divine power of death? Ron smiled coldly, waved the bone staff in his hand, and chanted a spell in a low voice. The divine power of death quickly wrapped around his palm like a snake. At this time, his eyes turned green. Like Klein, Ron also mastered part of the law of death and could create the divine power of death out of thin air. Death withering. Ron also made his move, and also used the divine power of death as a guide. This time, the power of the domain suddenly expanded 1,000 times. This was a confrontation between the divine power of death and the divine power of death. Neither side gave way to the other, and the two domains intersected, entangled, and collided. Klein's death vortex absorbed and strangled everything, while Ron's death withering corroded everything. Under the confrontation of the two diametrically opposite divine powers, all the undead creatures suffered. They were either swallowed by the death vortex or corroded by the death withering. In just an instant, more than half of the undead creatures disappeared. Under the collision of the two divine powers, Klein did not have a big advantage. At this time, he smiled slightly. Good, Ron, I still underestimated you. I didn't expect your strength to have grown to such a level. Unfortunately, you are still not my opponent. Not necessarily. Ron responded with a sneer. Klein, today, only one of us can leave here alive. Very well, I hope you can still talk to me like this later. Prepare to die. Klein's eyes shone brightly. He slowly raised the feet of the nether snake in his hand, and the powerful divine power of death once again shook the surroundings. At this moment, his long hair fluttered in the wind, and it was terrifying. I didn't expect him to have hidden his true strength. What's coming next is the real test. Ron clenched his fists, and his body trembled with excitement. He smiled slightly. But this is also good. Klein, if I could kill you so easily, how could I avenge Pamir? Chapter 801. Boom! The entire ruined hall shook once more as Klein frantically poured his death divine energy into it. The power of his domain increased by 100-fold. The death vortex that was constantly spinning in the sky suddenly transformed into a gigantic skull. The skull floated in midair as its fluttering long hair resembled millions of whips. They flailed in the wind, and the skull's hollow eyes emitted a sinister glow. From afar, the skull looked somewhat similar to Klein's face. At this time, the huge skull's mouth slowly opened, revealing sharp teeth. That bloody mouth was like an unfathomable black hole. Domain, Death Devour. A strange suction force overflowed from the skull's mouth and collided with Ron's domain, causing the surrounding space to collapse. Death Devour, devour everything. In an instant, whether it was Ron's undead creatures or even the corrosive power of death withering, everything was absorbed and devoured. Not good. Ron was shocked. He only felt the power in his body uncontrollably surging forward. Even his soul was being drawn in as the corrosive power of death withering was being absorbed by the other party. At this time, Klein crazily laughed. Ha ha. Ron, you are still too naive. Let me tell you one more thing. The biggest difference between you and me is not strength or realm, but race. Don't forget, Ron, you are only a human. I, Klein, come from the noble undead race. We undead race are 100 times better than other races when it comes to cultivating the power of the soul. We have a deeper understanding of death and the soul. This is a gap that you will never be able to surpass. Ron, you are a human undead mage. There is no way you can compare to the undead mages cultivated by the undead race. So, today you are destined to die. Klein was calm and composed. At this moment, he had the upper hand. Death Hand. Ron clenched his teeth and urged his death divine energy once more. In an instant, a huge hand stretched out and grabbed that huge skull. Boom. Rumble. Rumble. Dozens of loud sounds came from the front. The huge skull opened its mouth and the two forces collided. The huge black hand shook violently and turned into a black fog. The skull swallowed the huge hand again. It was as if the huge black hand had never appeared. Klein's Death Devour could devour everything, leaving nothing behind. What? How can this be? At this time, Ron's hands and feet were cold. Facing that terrifying skull with a powerful devouring power, he felt powerless for the first time. Am I really not his match? Can't I avenge Pamir? Is there really such a huge gap between the necromancy magic practiced by humans and necromancers? Ron's heart was filled with sorrow. He wasn't afraid of death, rather, he was unwilling and he was at a loss. Die. Klein, the skull, the skull, the skull, the skulls, the skull, 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 and this time. Ron moved his hand, and only then did he realize to his horror that he couldn't move his body. No. Not good. Ron's eyes opened wide. His body involuntarily flew towards the skull's mouth. Ron struggled desperately, but the suction of Death Devour was too strong. Soon, he was sucked into the skull's mouth. Boom! There was a loud sound like muffled thunder. Ron only felt his vision go dark and a sharp pain came from his mind. Ron let out a blood-curdling scream. At this moment, he felt as if his head was about to explode. In the depths of his knowledge sea, Ron's soul clutched his head and let out a painful cry. His body flickered and slowly dimmed. A large amount of black gas was emitted from his body, as if he was about to dissipate at any time. This was an extremely terrifying torture. The trembling from the depths of one's soul was like a person's soul being forcibly pulled out of their body. This kind of pain was not something ordinary people could bear. Ron, I originally didn't intend to do this, but since you're courting death, you can't blame me. This is the innate talent of the undead race. The necromancers you humans cultivate simply can't compare to us. Even if I teach you all of necromancy magic, you won't be able to make any big waves. Klein's face was full of malevolence, completely different from his previous amiable attitude. Ha ha! Struggle, scream, beg for mercy. Ron, you already have no chance. Today you must die, your soul will be my best trophy. After absorbing your powerful soul, I can even go one step further and condense godhood, directly becoming a god. Die! Klein fiercely waved the bone staff in his hand, his eyes filled with killing intent. At this time, the power of the terrifying skull condensed from Death Devour also rose to the peak in an instant. Ron could no longer hear what he was saying. His soul had already been separated from his body and absorbed into the terrifying skull's mouth. What was left was only a breathing corpse. I'm dead. Ron opened his eyes. His soul was drifting without any direction or purpose. He just drifted around like this, and as far as the eye could see, it was chaos. That's right, this is the death space, a world of death. The corner of Ron's mouth twitched a few times, and he laughed self-deprecatingly. Looks like I'm indeed not Klein's opponent. I didn't think I'd already be dead. After confirming that he was already dead, Ron's heart relaxed. In any case, he was already dead, so what was the use of thinking so much? Perhaps it was because he cultivated soul force, but Ron didn't take death too seriously. In his view, death was just another form of life. Life and death could be transformed into each other. But now, what could he do? Forget it, if I die, then I die. This is also good, it's over. Ron sighed and smiled bitterly. At this moment, he was slowly accepting reality. Death, to me, might be a kind of relief. After thinking through this point, Ron suddenly felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders, and his whole body relaxed. Ron's soul kept drifting. In the death space, it was chaos. There was nothing, and he even forgot the passage of time. At this time, Ron's eyes flashed, and then his eyes suddenly opened wide. Light. He saw a beam of light. In this chaotic world of death, how could there be a beam of light? Ron's thoughts were attracted by that beam of light, and his body involuntarily drifted towards the position of that beam of light. When Ron arrived in front of that beam of light and saw what was inside, he was truly shocked. In front of Ron, there was a figure wearing a black robe. His back was facing Ron, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. However, his aura was one with the surrounding death space, as if he couldn't be felt. It was a tall man, and his long black hair fluttered in the wind. Under the illumination of that beam of light, it was unreal. Who are you? Why are you here? Ron asked softly. He only felt that this man was emitting a familiar aura, making him feel even more intimate. Sigh, the black-haired man let out a long sigh. His sigh was filled with deep helplessness and disappointment, as well as a feeling of resentment towards iron for not becoming steel. At this time, the black-haired man slowly turned around. His entire body was wrapped in a thick black robe, and his face was covered with a sinister skull mask, revealing only a pair of eyes. When Ron's eyes met with the other party's, his entire body shook, and he involuntarily screamed. Chapter 802. The imposing figure that appeared in front of Ron was none other than the Lich King that he had met a few times before. Even though Ron had never seen his face, he could recognize him just from his aura. Mysterious, cold, and powerful, the Lich King had the most obvious aura of a necromancer, and there was also a sense of disdain for the world. He was the leader of the Scourge of the Undead Plane, the king in the hearts of all the undead. Right now, he was only an illusion. Even though he was only an illusion, the cold aura that the Lich King emitted made it hard for Ron to breathe. Even when facing the ancient dragon Maxwell, Ron didn't feel this way. At this moment, the Lich King stood in front of Ron and stared at him with a pair of pitch-black eyes. His deep eyes revealed a deep disappointment. At this moment, the Lich King that appeared in the Death Domain slowly opened his mouth. Ron, you disappoint me too much. Could it be that you've already forgotten your mission? The Lich King's words were deafening, and Ron was stunned. He stood there blankly and muttered, My mission? Yes, your mission. The Lich King turned around and faced Ron. His face was still solemn even though he was wearing a mask. Ron could feel that the other party's sword-like eyebrows were slightly raised under that terrifying mask, as if he was dissatisfied with him. "Could it be that you've already forgotten?" Ron was so nervous that he couldn't speak. "So you really did forget?" Seeing Ron's dazed expression, the Lich King sighed. His face became even more disappointed, and then his expression became even more severe. "Looks like it's time for you to remember properly." After speaking, he extended a finger and lightly tapped. Ron only felt a boom sound, and a sharp pain came from his head. At this moment, Ron's eyes opened wide. The chaos in front of his eyes gradually became clear, and a magnificent scene slowly unfolded. It was a huge city. It was majestic, tall, and magnificent. Dazzling magic power flickered on top of the tall defense towers. Warriors in heavy armor stood on top of the city walls, ready to fight. However, the tense faces of these soldiers were filled with nervousness and fear. That was because in front of them was a huge undead army that stretched as far as the eye could see. Countless blood-red skull flags fluttered in the wind and covered the plains. An uneasy aura that came from the depths of one's soul permeated the air above the city. In the crowd, a necromancer with a crown on his head stood on a tall wooden tower. Countless skeletons lifted the wooden tower from below and slowly moved towards the city wall. "Kill!" With the command of the undead army's commander, countless skeletons surged onto the city wall and engaged in a fierce battle with the enemy warriors. In the sky, frost dragons roared angrily. On the ground, there was a sea of skeletons. They were not afraid of death. Like a tide, they launched wave after wave of attacks on the city. The enemy was also very tenacious, but they could not stop the crazy skeleton tide. The city gate was breached, and the undead entered en masse. The enemy retreated as they fought. Finally, they retreated to the center of the city and fought with the undead in the street. The undead were powerful, and they were not inferior in the streets. Soon, they killed the enemy until corpses were everywhere, and blood flowed like a river. With the fall of the last warrior, the undead army occupied the entire city. They executed the nobles in the city, and under the butcher's knife of the undead, all the citizens chose to submit. Other than leaving some warriors to guard the city, most of them continued to advance. The undead army was invincible, conquering one city after another. On the city walls of these cities, blood-red skull flags that symbolized the Calamity Army fluttered. The powerhouses of countless races trembled under the might of the undead army. The undead army was ferocious. They ruled thousands of worlds, defeated large armies, and conquered countless races. Everything in front of him made Ron's blood boil. He wished he could become a part of this terrifying army. He wanted to fight, to kill, to make the Calamity Army famous. This is already a thing of the past. The Calamity Army now cannot even withstand a single blow. At this moment, the Lich King's gloomy voice sounded in Ron's ears. At this moment, the scene in front of him changed to the undead plain where the Calamity Army was located. What entered Ron's eyes was a boundless plain. Very quickly, Ron saw two armies meet on the plain and start a confrontation. One side was the undead army. There were tens of thousands of them. There were necromancers, death knights, death warriors, and so on. There were all kinds of races and professions. From their equipment, it seemed like they were a powerful first-class army. The undead army was facing off against an unknown race that Ron had never seen before. They were shorter in stature, but they did not look like dwarves. Other than a few warriors at the front, most of them were mages with magic staff. There were fewer of them than the undead army, only a few thousand of them. This race that was much shorter than dwarves was called the gnomes. Those with magic staffs were not mages, but arcanists. It was a powerful force that was similar to magic, but much more profound than magic. It had to be said that it was unfortunate for the dwarves to encounter the undead army that was several times more numerous than them on the plains. Everyone tensed up and waited for the battle to begin. The necromancer at the front said a few words loudly. The undead army that received the order began to move. They waved the Calamity Army's flag and surrounded the Gnome Legion like a metal bucket. They were prepared to use their advantage in numbers to destroy this weak army in one fell swoop. Facing an enemy that was several times their size, the Gnome Legion was not afraid. They slowly retreated and formed a defensive formation. The Gnome Arcanists began to cast spells to buff their warriors. A battle was about to break out. At this moment, the Calamity Army began to attack. Countless undead rushed towards the enemy like a tide. Kill! 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 The two sides engaged in a fierce battle. The battle was as fierce as ever. Perhaps knowing that they were going to die, the Gnome Legion exploded with powerful combat power. The light of combat aura and arcane spells flashed nonstop, repelling the undead army's attacks time and time again. The situation was in a stalemate, and the Gnome Legion was slowly leaning towards the gnomes. Compared to the Gnome Legion's powerful combat power, the undead army's battle was more impatient and rash. When the situation was slowly turning towards the Gnome Legion's favor, the Gnome Legion seemed to be hesitant. At this moment, the undead army's formation began to fall into chaos. At this moment, the Gnome Legion immediately launched a counterattack. Large numbers of undead were destroyed, turning into clouds of black mist and disappearing into the air. Without the protection of the undead army, the necromancers quickly became the targets of the Gnome Arcanists' arcane bullet. Fear was contagious and quickly spread throughout the army. Some people began to retreat and escape. Soon, it turned into an unprecedented defeat. The Gnome Legion took advantage of the situation and continued to pursue the undead army. They had once again created a classic battle where the Gnome Legion was outnumbered. Ron's mouth was wide open, and he could not close it for a long time. Was this still the Scourge Legion he had just seen? How did the Scourge Legion become like this? Looking at the blood-red skull flag on the ground that had been trampled into pieces, Ron felt a trace of mockery. Disgrace, this was a complete disgrace. They had a numerical advantage, and yet they had fought such a tragic battle. There were even a few dozen gnomes chasing hundreds of undead army away like ducks. Blood rushed to Ron's face. He clenched his fists tightly, and his body trembled uncontrollably. His eyes turned blood-red. The cries of killing in the distance did not stop. Figures in black robes fell to the ground one after another. In an instant, their bodies were pierced through by numerous sharp swords. At the same time, the Gnome Legion's arrogant laughter rang out, filled with contempt. The nobility and dignity of the undead army were completely trampled under the feet of the gnomes, who were not even a meter tall. At this moment, Ron was furious. "Are you angry? But now is not the time for you to be angry." Just as Ron was furious, the Lich King's voice sounded in his ears. "What difference did you see between the undead army after the battle and the undead army before? What difference was there?" Ron was stumped. He carefully recalled the two scenes he had just seen. After a while, he understood. In the first scene, the undead army's faces were filled with strong self-confidence, a domineering aura, and a will to fight to the death. But in the second scene, the undead army no longer had these things in their eyes. Instead, it was replaced with confusion, cowardice, and even a lack of courage to fight. Ron spoke carefully. "That's right." The Lich King nodded. "Then do you know what they are lacking?" Ron shook his head in confusion. "Self-confidence," the Lich King said without hesitation. "These undead army have already lost their self-confidence. No matter how strong an army without self-confidence is, they will still be defeated. Undead army without self-confidence, they are not worthy of being called undead." The Lich King's words made Ron feel enlightened. The haze disappeared, and it was as if the road ahead had become bright. "I understand, Sir Lich King." Ron nodded heavily. "Go, Ron. Always remember your mission. The hope of the undead race will fall on your shoulders." The Lich King nodded. After saying this, His body flashed and turned into a shadow, slowly disappearing. Ron panicked and yelled, "Sir Lich King, Sir Lich King!" However, the Lich King acted as if he didn't hear him. His body had already disappeared, leaving behind a chaotic space of death. He left just like that? Ron was a bit disappointed. The Lich King suddenly appeared and left in a hurry, leaving behind many unsolved mysteries. Ron still had many questions to ask. My mission. Thinking back to the scene just now, Ron couldn't help but bitterly smile. He could feel that the Lich King had placed high hopes on him. However, the Lich King thought too highly of him. How could the important mission of reviving the undead race fall on a human like him? Even the undead race's Klein was much better than a human like him, no matter if it was strength or reputation. At the very least, he wasn't a match for Klein right now. Sir Lich King, why are you leaving just like that? Even if you don't teach me how to defeat that guy, you should at least teach me how to leave Klein's death space. Could it be that confidence is all there is to it? Ron looked at the chaotic death space and bitterly smiled. The Lich King had appeared in the death space and met with Ron. After saying a bunch of nonsense, he left. In the end, nothing was resolved. This joke was a bit too big. Wait, Ron restrained his smile and became serious. He pondered for a moment, and his eyes flashed with light. I understand. The confidence that Sir Lich King talked about is that I have to be firm in my belief. As long as my beliefs are firm, there is nothing that I can't win. That's what the defeated undead lacked the most. Ron slowly raised his head with a firm gaze. Under the guidance of the Lich King, his confidence that had hit rock bottom after being defeated by Klein had completely recovered. Chapter 803. After several major destruction, the temple on the 18th floor of Bartlos prison had become a mess. In the middle of the broken temple, Klein was standing, and Ron was lying down. Hee, Ron, you're still too inexperienced. Klein muttered to himself with a victorious smile on his face when he saw Ron's fallen corpse. Ron, if you were a powerhouse of the undead race, with your talent, you might have become an existence that surpasses me. Unfortunately, you're a human after all. Practicing necromancy with a human body and soul will never surpass the undead race. We undead are natural soul controllers. However, there were no ifs in this world. Ron was already dead, and this was an ironclad fact. Ron, I know that your hometown is the Noah continent, but unfortunately, you'll never be able to return. Klein looked regretfully at Ron's corpse before looking into the distance. Since Lord Eudelis has been released from prison, it's time for me to leave. Everything is going smoothly, and my plan is perfect. Klein's smile was full of confidence. In his plan, everyone was a pawn that could be sacrificed. Even the godlike sky dragon Eudelis was just an object that he could use. Klein had just taken 2 steps when his body suddenly stiffened. He turned around and stared at Ron's corpse on the ground in disbelief. He saw that on Ron's corpse lying on the ground, specks of starlight were faintly discernible and flickering. That was clearly the soul fire. How could this be? How could the soul fire appear on a dead person? Impossible! Klein opened his mouth wide as he blurted out a sentence. At this time, with a ping sound, a large amount of cyan flames suddenly emerged from Ron's body, and the flames burned fiercely. Under the burning of the soul fire, the death aura on Ron's body slowly faded away, and his vitality began to recover bit by bit, repairing his broken body and soul. Finally, under Klein's astonished gaze, Ron slowly got up. Ron, you resurrected? Klein clenched his teeth, and a trace of panic flashed in his eyes. The situation in front of him was too strange, and it was beyond his expectations. A person whose soul had been devoured should not be able to revive. Klein stared intently at Ron, sizing him up in surprise. Killing intent flashed in his eyes as he clenched the nether snake staff in his hand. After coming back to life, Ron felt his entire body relax. A carefree and unrestrained feeling filled his entire body. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Ron felt that the world was clearer than before. Every blade of grass, every tree, every insect, and every flower could be seen. Scenes that he had never seen before, sounds that he had never heard before, all poured into the depths of his soul. Ron knew that this was the work of the Lich King. When his soul had been destroyed by Klein, the Lich King had not only reconstructed his soul, but had also modified it. Although Ron's strength did not increase by too much, the strength of his soul was much stronger than before. There was more room for improvement, and it could accommodate more soul energy. It was like a cup. Although there was still a lot of water in the cup had become bigger, and it could hold more water in the future. These were the benefits that Ron had obtained, although he did not know what these benefits meant. After the initial shock, Klein's expression quickly returned to normal. For a necromancer who had dealt with souls and corpses for a long time, resurrecting the dead was nothing more than a normal thing. What made Klein puzzled was, how did Ron come back to life? Ron, you actually came back to life? How is this possible? Didn't your soul get swallowed up? Your body? What happened? Klein asked. It was the Lich King who saved me. Ron looked at Klein and smiled as he answered honestly. His dispirited state from being defeated by Klein had been swept away, and his smile was full of confidence. What? Klein stared blankly, and his brows furrowed. What did you say? You said the Lich King saved you? Haha, this joke is not funny at all. Ron did not defend himself. He only stood there calmly, and looked at Klein with a faint smile. Klein stared blankly for a moment before his expression darkened. Ron, the Lich King is already dead. Even if you don't want to say it, you don't have to use such a clumsy lie to deceive me. Perhaps you have some special treasure or equipment on you that can resurrect you, but that's not important. What's important is that even if you resurrect, you will not be my match. The goddess of luck will not always be on your side. The strong will always be the strong, and he doesn't need luck. Klein raised the bone staff in his hand, and his body moved slightly as he left the ground. Ron, you and I are both necromancers, and should be on the same side. However, the last thing you should have done was to challenge me. You are seeking death. Klein, I never planned to challenge you. Everything I did was to avenge Pamir. Faced with the powerful Klein, the resurrected Ron did not back down. His eyes burned with fighting spirit. Klein laughed. Haha, you didn't hesitate to give up your life for that goblin. I don't know if I should say that you have principles. Or should I say that you are stupid? It's just a goblin with the strength of the sacred domain. He has no value to me at all. Klein's eyes were filled with killing intent, and he said sternly, Ron, no matter how many times you resurrect, you will not be my match. Great God of death, your loyal follower will follow your guidance and bring death to this world. Death devour. A loud sound rang out, and the world shook violently. It was as if the god of death had descended. A terrifying giant skull stretched across the horizon, its black bloody mouth wide open as if it wanted to devour everything in the world. The giant skull descended upon the small shrine, and in an instant all the broken stones were lifted into the air and flew into the sky, constantly circling around. The entire world was collapsing, and it was a scene of doomsday. It was this giant skull that gave Ron a terrifying memory. It was the feeling of death. However, at this moment, there was no fear in Ron's eyes. He quietly looked at the sky, his face expressionless. Death devour? Haha, to me, death is not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing is sinking into the endless space, being tortured, forgetting time, forgetting everything. Ron slowly waved the bone staff in his hand and chanted in a low voice. When he finished chanting the last syllable, a powerful aura surged out, shaking the world. Death space. A green wave of air suddenly spread out, enveloping the entire space. The power of the death space was even more powerful than Klein's death devour, and the giant skull he summoned was also enveloped in it. Not good. Boom. Klein only felt his vision darken, and then he found himself in a dusky space. Klein composed himself and looked around. He saw that the surroundings were chaotic, and the dusky sky was very oppressive. The space in the distance was endless. What is this place? Why am I here? Where's Ron? An ominous feeling rose in his heart. Forget it, let's look around first. There must be an exit here. Klein gritted his teeth. Pling! His body turned into a black fog and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Klein flew at high speed in the chaotic space. As he flew, his heart sank. Although Klein did not know where this place was, he knew that he had been tricked by Ron. Damn it, if I can get out of here! Klein secretly gritted his teeth, his black eyes full of ruthlessness. At this moment, Klein only saw a blur in front of his eyes. Ron's figure instantly appeared in front of Klein, as if he had always been there. It's you? Ron, you're finally willing to appear. Haha, go to hell, you don't have any chance this time. Klein gnashed his teeth and said. At this moment, Ron was standing in the void, coldly looking at him. He sighed slightly. Klein, do you still not understand? You've already lost. I've lost. Klein laughed crazily as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. His smile faintly revealed a sinister look. I've lost? I've lost to you? How is that possible? Klein shouted in exasperation. Ron, just you wait, I'll tear you to pieces right now. After saying that, he waved the nether snake staff in his hand and mobilized his soul force. Ron did not move at all, still looking at him expressionlessly. At this moment, Klein's movements stopped. His eyes opened wide, revealing an intense look of disbelief. How is that possible, my power? How did my power disappear? Ron, what did you do? Klein hysterically shouted. Don't waste your energy, Klein, Ron slowly said. This is the death space that I created with my divine power. In here, I am the master. From the moment you entered the death space, you've already lost. I've lost? No. I won't lose. Even if I did, I won't lose to you. Ron, don't forget, you'll always be a human. In the world of necromancy, we, the undead, are the expert. You, a branch family, will never understand the truth of necromancy. Even though he was already in this situation, Klein still could not accept this reality in his heart. He seemed to have gone crazy as he charged towards Ron. Sigh, Ron shook his head and sighed softly. He stretched out his hand and waved casually. Boom! Klein only felt a violent tremor in his mind, followed by a blank space. From this moment on, Klein truly understood that he had lost. He had really lost. His sea of consciousness was collapsing, and his soul was heavily injured. To a necromancer, physical injuries were never as serious as injuries to the soul. Klein's vision blurred, and his thoughts returned to reality in an instant. He was in that broken temple. In the broken temple, there were only Ron and Klein. What was different from before was that Ron was standing, and Klein was lying down. Ron, who was standing in front of Klein, had an indifferent expression. He did not even have the joy of victory. He looked coldly at Klein, a trace of pity in his eyes. Klein, on the path of necromancy, there is no insurmountable gap between the undead and humans. What determines the level of strength is the level and realm. It is undeniable that the undead have a natural advantage in necromancy, but this does not mean anything, Ron said slowly. He was not worried about Klein's counterattack before his death, because in this battle, he had gained self-confidence. That was a firm self-belief, which was the strongest strength in itself. Klein stared fixedly at Ron for a long time, and finally lost. He retracted his gaze, and the corners of his mouth twitched a few times as he sighed slightly. I've lost. Chapter 804. Amidst the rubble of the ruins, Ron and Klein looked at each other quietly. The atmosphere fell silent and neither of them spoke. After defeating Klein and avenging Pamir, Ron didn't feel much joy in his heart. On the contrary, he felt a little melancholy. Along the way, Klein could be considered Ron's friend and mentor. He had taught Ron many cultivation techniques. Even the method to summon the skeleton sovereign had been taught by him. But in the end, Ron still defeated Klein. He had been thoroughly defeated. His soul had been severely injured, and his knowledge had almost collapsed. Physical injuries could be healed with healing spells or health potions, but injuries to the soul were very difficult to heal, and there was no such medicine. Only a powerful existence like the Lich King Hermes could repair damaged souls. Why? Even if Pamir knew your identity, why did you have to kill him? He's just a powerhouse of the sacred domain. The Red Silk Army has nothing to do with him. After a long time, Ron finally broke the silence and asked Klein, who was lying on the ground on the verge of death. Klein revealed a bitter smile. Is there any point in saying this now? I want to know. Ron calmly looked at him. It's very simple. Apart from knowing my identity, he also deduced many things from my actions. Although this guy isn't very strong, he's quite smart. Ron, you have to know that without the support of powerful strength, a smart person often doesn't live long. Klein smiled meaningfully, revealing a row of white teeth. Although Ron's state of mind was firm, when he heard Klein's words, his eyes turned red and his body trembled. He clenched his fists tightly, the anger in his heart burning fiercely. At this moment, Ron wanted nothing more than to use Frost Nova to kill this cold-blooded and cruel guy. Klein had no remorse for killing an innocent person to cover up his secret. Ron calmed his agitated heart, and his clenched fists loosened slightly. He coldly said, Your Red Silk Army's target was Utaris, who was imprisoned in Bartlow's prison, right? In order to rescue Utaris from prison, you tricked countless adventurers into coming here and then destroyed the planar teleportation array, forcing them to enter Bartolo's prison to clear the way for you. Because of this, countless people paid with their precious lives. Is this how your Red Silk Army does things? Cough, cough. At this moment, Klein coughed a few times, his eyes revealing a cold light. In order to achieve your goal, it's normal to use some methods. Haha, Ron, do you think those adventurers are good people? These people are greedy and ignorant. For wealth and benefits, they won't shrink from any crime. Death is the best punishment for them. However, my plan succeeded. Lord Utaris was successfully released from prison, and he will once again take control of the Red Silk Army. The Red Silk Army will once again revive, and with the momentum of a whale, sweep through the entire mortal plane. The more Klein spoke, the more excited he became. His pale face was suffused with a strange red color. Ron knew that this was a reflection of the setting sun. Cough, cough. At this point, Klein violently coughed. Now that the truth was finally out, Ron learned many things about the Red Silk Army from Klein. 100,000 years ago, the powerful divine beast sky dragon Utaris, in order to resist the oppression of the mortal plane's powerful existences, launched the Red Silk Uprising that shocked the entire mortal plane. Countless rebels used the Red Silk Army as a symbol, and under the leadership of Utaris, set off a reign of terror in the mortal plane. The Red Silk Army spread like a raging fire, constantly besieging cities and seizing lands. Their momentum shook the entire mortal plane. As the Red Silk Army grew stronger, it finally caused panic in several powerful existences of the mortal plane. The powerful existences began to mobilize their forces, gathering dozens of armies to encircle and annihilate the Red Silk Army. Compared to the powerful existences that had experienced countless years, the Red Silk Army, whose foundation was unstable, was not a match for them, and was annihilated by several powerful existences. After the Red Silk Army was defeated, its members either died, were injured, or fled. Their leader, Utaris, was suppressed by several powerful existences and imprisoned in the land of exiles, Bartlos prison. Finally, the question in his heart was answered, but Ron could not be happy. To the powerful existences of the mortal plane, the Red Silk Army was a provocative rebel, but to the innocent adventurers involved in the rescue operation, the Red Silk Army was an out-and-out demon. In the broken temple, the atmosphere fell silent again, leaving only Klein's increasingly heavy breathing in the air. His eyes grew wider and wider, and gradually the light in his eyes faded. His heavily injured soul also showed signs of dissipating. "You are an undead, why not join the forces of the undead, such as the Scourge?" Ron was silent for a moment before he finally asked. "Scourge?" Klein was stunned for a moment, his eyes wide open, looking at Ron as if he were looking at a fool. After a long while, he could not help but laugh. "Ha, what did you say? You want me to join the Scourge? Ron, if I'm not crazy, then you must be crazy, ha ha." Klein laughed until tears flowed out of his eyes, and he could not stop coughing. After a while, he stopped laughing, and looked at Ron with eyes full of mockery. What happened to the Scourge? Ron was shocked. He urgently wanted to know about the Scourge, it was related to his mission. "Ha ha," Klein sneered. 100,000 years ago, the Scourge army was at its strongest under the leadership of the Lich King Hermes. However, ever since Hermes' death, the Scourge army has deteriorated day by day. As for now? Bah, the Scourge now is just a joke. When he spoke of the Scourge, Klein's eyes were full of disdain, and even deep hatred. Haha, the current leader of the Scourge is the Lich King Gugerian. Haha, this is a rather useless fellow. I would rather die than serve him. If you go to the mortal plane of the undead, you might be able to see him, Klein laughed coldly. What? Ron's body trembled. He obtained two pieces of information from Klein's words. The first was that the Scourge was still there, but their strength was much weaker than before. The second was that Hermes was not the only Lich King. There was another fellow called Gugerian, who was also the current leader of the Scourge. In reality, Lich King was only a title among the undead. However, this title was extremely noble, and not just anyone could be given this title. Lich King? Gugerian? Ron muttered this name carefully, as if trying to read some information from this name. Haha, the incompetent Gugerian simply can't compare to Lord Utaris. Whether it is strength or prestige, the difference is not small. Only Lord Utaris is a true expert. Under his leadership, the Red Silk Army will regain its former glory. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see it. Klein's eyes revealed a boundless longing for life. If possible, he was willing to follow Utaris. Unfortunately, he did not have the chance. As for the undead, haha, Ron, forget about them. The undead have no hope, Klein muttered. His words revealed a deep resentment towards the undead. As he said this, his eyes gradually lost their luster, indicating that his life was about to end. Klein spoke of many secrets of the undead in one breath, causing Ron to be incomparably shocked and speechless for a long time. After a long silence, Ron finally asked his last question. You have already successfully rescued Utaris from prison. Where is he? Where did he go? Klein smiled bitterly, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. Lord Utaris left long ago. After defeating Maxwell, he will go and retrieve what belongs to him. What is it? Ron asked subconsciously. No. Continent, what? Ron trembled. Chapter 805. When Ron defeated Klein, in a distant space-time, on a plane called the Noah continent, the powerhouses of the entire continent were trembling under the terrifying aura of the mythological beast. On the huge battlefield that had been swept into a plain, a young woman stood in the air with her hands behind her back, calm and composed, her expression arrogant. She had beautiful blonde hair, and her whole body was full of a noble aura. Coupled with her delicate face, she was like a beautiful angel walking in the world. But this young woman with the face of an angel was not an angel, but a demon who wanted to take people's lives. The young woman smiled slightly. She had reason to look down on the powerhouses of the Noah continent in front of her. The combined strength of these people was not even comparable to her finger. What do you want? Hamelin, Beslay, and Kay looked nervous and asked in trembling voices. They had already felt the huge gap in strength between them and the other party. I'll give you a choice. The young woman smiled and said in a very cold tone, "Pledge your loyalty to me or die." Like a sudden clap of thunder, it heavily struck the bottom of everyone's heart. For a moment everyone was stunned. Surrender or die? Hamelin and the others looked bitter. This was indeed a very simple choice, but under the power of the other party, the survivors had no choice. One was to lose their lives and the other was to sell their souls. What do we do now? Kadena was burning with anxiety. She looked at Aurora and Lin with a pleading look. The strength of the other party was far beyond everyone's estimation. Now the Noah continent was in danger. Aurora fiercely gritted her teeth. Don't worry, I've already sent out a message for help. I believe that Ron received the message and will definitely come back to save us, Aurora said, but in fact she was not sure. God knows whether Ron received the message or not, or was already dead. Yes. Lin reluctantly squeezed out a smile on her face, but Ron won't be so easy to wait. He won't appear until the last moment. At the most desperate moment, everyone placed their hopes on Ron. If only he were still alive. Aurora sighed and looked helplessly at the sky, as if there was Ron's shadow in the sky. The young woman waited calmly, but after a long time, no one responded. She finally became impatient and sneered. It seems that none of you are willing to pledge your loyalty to me. Very well, then you can only die. Without any warning, the young woman suddenly attacked. A powerful flame aura instantly condensed, and then a huge pillar of fire fell from the sky. As if the heavens had descended, a powerful flame aura almost burned the entire sky. This pillar of fire contained the power of a god. It was a type of elemental divine power, the divine power of fire. Not good! Hamelin, Kay, and Beslay cried out in alarm. The young woman's target was not them, but Kadena and the others. How could an ordinary powerhouse of the sacred domain resist the attack of a divine beast? It would only take a moment for them to turn into ashes. Everyone's heart suddenly tightened. Hamelin and the other powerhouses of the sacred domain wanted to save them, but it was too late. On the ground, Kadena and the others were pale with fright. In the face of such a powerful and unparalleled power, they closed their eyes in despair. Boom! A loud sound rang out. The pillar of fire falling from the sky seemed to have hit a hard barrier and instantly melted like spring snow. Countless flames scattered like fireworks. Who is ruining my good fortune? The young woman who was the incarnation of the phoenix turned her head angrily and shouted loudly. Noah? When she turned her head and looked at the sky not far behind her, her eyes fell on the tall and imposing figure, and her pupils could not help but shrink. Lord Noah? Hamelin and the others rubbed their eyes, and then a look of ecstasy appeared on their faces. Lord Noah! Lord Noah has finally returned. The person who came was Noah. He stood high in the sky, quietly sizing up the young woman with a pair of golden eyes, his whole body exuding unfathomable power. Lord Noah! Lord Noah! Suddenly seeing Noah, Hamelin and the others saluted. Everyone living in the Noah plane respected this powerful planar guardian from the bottom of their hearts. On the other hand, Kadena and the others cheered loudly. Unfortunately, the Noah in front of them was not his main body, but a phantom. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. When the young woman saw Noah, her whole body trembled, her teeth chattering, and her eyes overflowing with hatred. It's you? You actually came back? The young woman gnashed her teeth and said. Facing Noah, her voice actually trembled. Noah's face was expressionless, but now he smiled faintly. Long time no see. Servia, I didn't think we would meet again. Only then did Hamelin and the others know that this young woman with the identity of a divine beast in front of them was called Servia. Noah glanced at her and said slowly, After I defeated you, I destroyed your body, but your soul escaped. I didn't expect you to not repent after all these years and actually come here. That's right. Servia sneered. I am the great divine beast, the undying bird. As long as my soul is not destroyed, I will be reborn. All these years, there was not a moment when I didn't want to take revenge on you. If not for my strength being greatly reduced after my rebirth, do you think you would be able to live peacefully until now? Noah nodded slightly. Back then in the main plane, it doesn't matter who was right and who was wrong. But if you want to take revenge, just come at me alone. Using the power of a divine beast to indiscriminately kill the innocent, what's the difference between you and the devil? That's right. I want to kill all of you. Servia roared, her face becoming distorted. I purposely waited for you to leave the Noah continent before making my move. Haha, when you return and see the ruins of the Noah continent, it will be too late for regrets, right? You are simply unreasonable. Noah shook his head helplessly. At this moment there was some anger on his face, and he smiled coldly. Since that's the case, there's no need for us to continue talking. As long as I completely kill you, the living beings of the Noah continent will have a day of peace. Ha! Kill me? Can you do it? Servia covered her mouth and laughed loudly. Don't forget, what appeared here now is not your true body, but merely a projection of your avatar. With just this bit of power, you can't do anything to me, Noah. I admit that I can't kill you, but I can destroy your divine avatar, and the Noah continent that you treasure. Ha ha! Noah, I will make you regret it. I will make you blame yourself for eternity. Servia screamed crazily, her beautiful face becoming extremely ferocious. At this moment there was a boom sound and a large amount of flames emerged from Servia's body, accompanied by the clear cry of a bird. Under the shadow of the flames, her body underwent a huge change. In front of the terrifying divine power of fire, the entire world trembled. A huge bird that was dozens of times larger than a phoenix and covered in flames appeared between heaven and earth. That was the undying bird, Servia's true body. She spread her wings, and the wingspan of several kilometers covered the sky. The entire sky seemed to be roasted and turned red. The terrifying aura of fire shook the world, and the moisture in the space evaporated. Even standing on the ground a few kilometers away, one could feel the scorching heat in the air. The undying bird that had transformed into her true body was filled with the majesty of a divine beast. She raised her head and let out a clear cry, and a powerful force shook the entire space. This is the true strength of a divine beast? Kay, who was not far away, clenched his fists tightly as he felt the increasingly blazing aura of the flames. Because he used too much strength, his fists were clenched until they turned white. At this moment, he understood that in front of a true divine beast, the strength of the divine domain that he was so proud of was nothing. There will be a day when I will also become a true divine beast. I will definitely. Kay relaxed his clenched fists and secretly swore in his heart. His eyes flashed with a resolute radiance. The might of the divine beast shocked everyone. Even Hamelin couldn't help but sweat for Noah. Facing this terrifying divine beast, could Lord Noah defeat her? Standing in front of the huge divine beast, Noah seemed somewhat weak and small. His body was only about the size of Servia's eyes, but his eyes remained calm. The divine beast's shocking aura didn't affect him in the slightest. At this moment, Noah smiled faintly. You are right, Servia. The body that appeared here is only a projection. But don't forget that you are not at your peak. You only have the appearance of a divine beast, but you don't have the strength that a divine beast should have. My current strength is indeed inferior to yours, but to kill you, it is enough." The moment the words, "It is enough," fell, Noah moved. As soon as he made his move, it was accompanied by a shocking aura of a powerhouse. It was as if heaven and earth had overlapped in an instant. Sword of heaven and earth. A huge golden sword appeared in Noah's hand in an instant. It crossed the horizon and fiercely chopped down on Serbia's body with lightning speed. No, impossible. The moment the huge sword chopped down, Serbia finally realized her fear. She cried out in horror, "Impossible, impossible! How did your law of strength increase to such a terrifying level?" Serbia had miscalculated. She didn't think that the Noah in front of her was no longer the Noah of the past. While she was recovering her strength, the other party's strength had also grown under the powerful force. The true body of the undying bird collapsed, revealing Serbia's original appearance. Her body was covered in wounds and she was battered and exhausted. Her beautiful face was filled with fear. "Noah, I beg you. Let me go. I am willing to do anything for you. I am willing to be loyal to you, I am willing to offer my soul." Perhaps sensing the impending death, Serbia finally couldn't help but beg for mercy. "Your suggestion is very attractive, but unfortunately, it's too late." In the face of Serbia's bitter begging, Noah was unmoved. He said indifferently, "Your appearance has already disrupted my plan. Now you can die." Under the powerful pressure, Serbia's body turned into countless pieces. At this moment, a green ball of light flew out from the disintegrated flesh and blood, quickly escaping into the distance. "That's her soul. Be careful, she's trying to escape." How could Serbia's little tricks hide from Hamelin, who trained in necromancy magic? He cried out in alarm to warn Noah, and at the same time, prepared to release necromancy magic to trap that ball of light. Hamelin's movements were very fast, but unfortunately, Noah was even faster. He stretched out his hand, and a golden aura came out of his body and fiercely blasted the green ball of light. Compared to Hamelin, Noah was more direct. He wanted to destroy Serbia's soul and completely eliminate this hidden danger. "Noah, you're ruthless!" Serbia cried out loudly. At this moment, her fragile soul began to disappear. Chapter 806. Inside a teleportation portal located in the Roland Empire's Kalov province, there was a sea of people everywhere. The shouts of adventurers rose and fell. "Make way! Let me pass first! Ah! Don't push! Damn it, I won't be polite if you keep pushing! Get lost! Don't block the way!" Due to the appearance of the divine realm's alien beasts, the people who had no way to resist began to flee. These fleeing people crowded the entire magic transmission array, and there were still countless people rushing over. Under the havoc of the divine realm's alien beasts, there was no safe place in the entire Noah continent, except for one, the alien plane. Although the other plane was also filled with beasts and danger lurked everywhere, it was still much better than the divine beasts that wreaked havoc in the Noah continent. The divine beasts without intelligence were very ferocious and killed everywhere. The cities they descended upon were all turned into ruins. Regardless of whether they were humans or animals, they all died under the bombardment of magic. Don't rush, don't push. One by one. The person maintaining order was a skinny old man with a white beard. He himself had the strength of a swordsman, but because there were too many people coming, his forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. The old man's words did not have any obvious effect. Facing the swordsman, even a powerhouse from the sacred domain would be powerless, let alone a swordsman. Bang, bang, bang. At this time, the circle of light of the teleportation portal lit up. It was different from the rising circle of light just now. This time, the circle of light was descending, which meant that someone was coming from the other plane. "What's going on?" In this place full of refugees, there are still people coming from the other side? Isn't this causing trouble? The old man, maintaining order, gradually frowned and muttered to himself. His face was full of displeasure. When the portal was in the middle of teleportation, it couldn't be used at the same time. The fleeing crowd instantly quieted down, and some people had a mocking look on their faces. If these people knew that coming back was equivalent to suicide, they would probably regret it so much that their intestines would turn green. Everyone stared nervously at the portal that was constantly operating. Finally, the portal stopped, and a few figures of different heights slowly appeared in the center of the portal. That's when the old man saw the few figures walking out of the portal, he was stunned. He rubbed his eyes, and there was a look of disbelief in his eyes. Oh my God! What am I seeing? It's President Frigga. There's also Elder Firth of the Dragons, Lord Undine of the Elven High Priestess, Lord Hao Qin of the Beaumont clan. What's going on? Didn't they disappear during the teleportation? Why are you back? Could it be that they went to another plane? We're saved. As soon as Frigga and the others appeared, they caused waves of cheers. Everyone respected these famous realm of the gods' powerhouses from the bottom of their hearts. What's going on? Why are there so many people at the teleportation point? Looking at the dense crowd below, Frigga frowned. Yeah, look. They look like they're fleeing, the chief elven priestess Undine said. Say, Sir Speaker, the white-haired old man came over and stammered. These people fled here to escape the pursuit of strange beasts from the realm of the gods. They want to go to another plane of existence. What? Strange beasts from the realm of the gods. As soon as the old man finished speaking, the faces of all the realm of the gods' powerhouses changed. Strange beasts from the realm of the gods? Why would strange beasts from the realm of the gods appear on the Noah continent? Hao Qin of the Beaumont clan raised his eyelids slightly, his eyes shining brightly. He stared at the old man, his gaze piercing through him like a sharp sword. The old man with the strength of a swordsman broke out in cold sweat under Hao Qin's gaze. I don't know either. They seem to have appeared out of nowhere. 3 of them appeared at once. These strange beasts from the realm of the gods are very ferocious. They wreak havoc everywhere. No one in the entire Noah continent can stop them. The old man stammered out the conclusion of the matter. 3 strange beasts from the realm of the gods. R.A. Firth's expression became serious. He turned around and glanced at Frigga, Hao Qin, and the others. I think this should be the reason why they used the plane transmission to ask us to return. Frigga raised her head, her eyes full of determination. We must stop them immediately. Undine closed her eyes and slowly raised her staff. After a while, she said, the power of nature has already helped us find the target. They are southwest of us, let's go. No one hesitated any longer. With a whistle, they disappeared into the sky. These people are so powerful. My heart almost stopped when they looked at me. Some of the adventurers who had recovered from the shock felt lingering fear. It would be great if I had such powerful strength. Seeing the figures of Frigga and the others slowly disappear, everyone's eyes were filled with envy. It's finally over. The soul of the divine beast Phoenix gradually disappeared into the void. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at the godlike Noah standing in the sky, their hearts spontaneously welled up with a surge of respect. Look, what is that? At this time, the elven holy archer Aurora, who was far away from the battlefield, pointed into the distance and shouted as if she had discovered a new continent. There's nothing there. Vivian, Kadena, and the others looked into the distance, but they could not see anything. There are a few small black dots. They seem to be people. They are flying over here at high speed. Aurora's eyes could see farther than ordinary people. At this time, her eyes suddenly opened and turned green. That was the elven archer's exclusive skill, focus. They were getting closer and closer. The black dots gradually revealed their true forms. It's the chairman and the others. They are back! Aurora was the first to recognize the people and shouted excitedly. Just as Aurora said, the chairman of the Parliament of the Noah continent, Frigga, the deputy chairman of the Dragons, R.A. Firth, the deputy chairman of the Parliament, Beaumont, the patriarch of the Dragon clan, Hao Qin, Senator Undine, and the others appeared in the sky one by one. The powerhouses of the divine realm of the Noah continent had finally returned from the other plane. Their appearance caused the people on the ground to cheer. Where's Ron? Soon, Aurora discovered that something was wrong. All the powerhouses of the divine realm had returned, but Ron's shadow was nowhere to be seen. Ron? Kadina's face turned pale. She took a step forward, and her body could not help but tremble violently. Could it be? Ron, It can't be. It can't be. Kadina was burning with anxiety. Bean-sized tears flowed down her pretty cheek. Don't let your imagination run wild, Kadina. I believe that Ron will be fine. Di Lin, who was standing to the side, hugged her and comforted her softly. When she said this, Di Lin's eyes were also filled with tears. Everyone was silent. Their faces were covered with haze. They could not help but worry about Ron's safety. Vivian's heart was also heavy. Losing Ron was a huge blow to the Scourge Church. Frigga and the others, who had rushed back from the land of exile, were shocked when they saw the destroyed battlefield. However, when R.A. Firth and Hao Qin saw Besley and Kay, who had advanced to the divine realm, their anger turned into joy. Ha ha ha, old black dragon, your daughter Besley has also advanced to the divine realm. Congratulations, congratulations! Beaumont Behemoth. Hao Qin laughed heartily. Ha ha, old Beaumont, your grandson is also not bad. He's already a Beaumont Behemoth. I'm looking forward to his strength. The black dragon R.A. Firth also laughed heartily. To the dragons and the Beaumont clan, this was a joyous occasion. This allowed these two old rivals to put down their grudges, and their moods also improve. At this time, they all saw Noah in the sky. They were slightly surprised and bowed to pay their respects. Lord Noah. At this moment, Noah was calmly standing in the sky. He had just killed the divine beast Serb, but there was no joy on his face. On the contrary, he looked like he had a lot on his mind. Facing everyone, he only nodded indifferently as a greeting. Noah's gaze swept across everyone's faces one by one, and he sighed slightly. Follow me. After saying that, he stretched out his hands, and with a slight force, he parted them. Swish, a large hole was torn open in the void. Frigga and the others understood and cheerfully walked into the spatial passage in the void, directly disappearing into the void. At this time, Noah waved at Kadina and the others. You guys come as well, me? You're talking about us? Aurora opened her mouth wide in surprise, but she saw Noah nodding at them, turned around and disappeared into the void. It can't be? Lord Noah called us over? Aurora turned around and said to Kadina and the others. Let's go, Di Lin said in a deep voice. Perhaps we can find out about Ron's whereabouts from them. Kadina nodded silently. Kadina, Aurora, Di Lin, Vivian, and the others slowly floated up and followed Noah into the spatial passage. At the end of the spatial passage was the place where Noah lived. It was a space that he had specially opened up, and it did not belong to any place on the continent of Noah. In other words, without Noah's permission, no one could enter. After passing through a winding corridor, they arrived at a spacious and bright hall. After hearing what Frigga and the others said after returning from the land of exile, Noah frowned. You're saying that Ron, in order to avenge his friend, chose to stay and fight a decisive battle with that divine necromancer Klein? Yes, Frigga nodded. Homelin's eyes flashed. A divine necromancer, a powerful undead from the main plane. Their battle must be very exciting. It's a pity. I won't be able to see it. Kadina's gaze dimmed, and a trace of worry appeared in her eyes. At that time, we received an urgent message from the continent of Noah, so Ron told us to return first. Frigga smiled and continued, "Fortunately, Sir took action and solved this problem for the continent of Noah. If we had known earlier, we wouldn't have been in such a hurry to return. As a Dimension Guardian, such a small matter is insignificant." Noah waved his hand and said modestly. At this time, his face became serious. "But if you want to say that you have solved the problem, it's too early to say that." Beslay was startled. "So, Sir Noah thinks that the problem with the continent of Noah is not over?" "It's not over," Noah sighed, a trace of bitterness appearing at the corner of his mouth. "That divine beast is just a small interlude. The real trouble is just beginning." "The real trouble?" Chapter 807. In a distant space, Noah's figure was standing in the void in a spatial crack in another plane. Below him were countless black energies roaming the space. Noah, who was wearing a purple robe, had a dignified expression. He had a well-defined face, 2 sharp eyebrows, and a pair of eagle-like eyes staring straight ahead. Standing in front of Noah was a sturdy middle-aged man. He wore a linen, tattered robe and had chestnut-colored hair. Even though he looked rather dispirited, his eyes were brimming with vigor and light flashed through them from time to time. "Long time no see, Brother Noah." The middle-aged man actually called Noah a brother, and Noah didn't deny it. It seemed that the relationship between the two wasn't ordinary. However, their relationship didn't seem to be as close as it seemed. From Noah's expression, he seemed to be rather fearful of the middle-aged man in front of him. "I didn't think that we would meet again." Noah looked at the middle-aged man and squeezed out a smile. "You finally came out." "Yes. I came out." The corners of the middle-aged man's mouth rose slightly. He had his hands behind his back and looked into the distance. 100,000 years. 100,000 years, and today. "I finally came out." The middle-aged man standing in front of Noah was none other than the transcendent divine beast, who had just escaped from the planar prison of Bartolos, the king of dragons, sky dragon Utaris. He smiled and waved his hand, and a gray object flew out from his palm. It was the head of a huge magic beast with several pairs of horns on its forehead. It seemed to be damaged and had been dead for a long time. Noah looked down and his expression froze. "That was the head of the ancient dragon Maxwell. You killed him?" Noah stared at Maxwell's head and said in a deep voice, "That's right." Utaris smiled faintly, as if he was talking about an insignificant matter. "Why?" Noah asked. "This question isn't worth answering." Utaris laughed. "Brother Noah, if it were you, and you were imprisoned by this guy for 100,000 years, wouldn't you be angry at all? Letting this guy die is already letting him off easy." Utaris said regretfully. According to his thoughts, Maxwell should not have died so easily. He should have been tortured before he died. Noah looked at Utaris seriously for a while before shaking his head. "I didn't expect that after being imprisoned in Bartolos prison for so long, your strength actually increased instead of decreasing. This surprised me." "Haha, there's nothing unexpected." Utaris waved his hand. "To tell you the truth, Brother Noah, I've always remembered the humiliation from 100,000 years ago. When I was imprisoned in the planar prison of Bartolos, I thought about revenge every day. I wanted to tell those guys that what Utaris, lost. One day I'll personally take it back." Utaris stretched out a hand and slowly clenched it into a fist. His eagle eyes revealed an intense killing intent, and in an instant, the entire space trembled. Noah's expression did not change. He slowly shook his head, looked away, and sighed. "It's already over 100,000. You still don't plan on giving up?" "Give up? Haha." Utaris laughed loudly, and the entire space shook. "I was imprisoned in Bartolos prison for 100,000 years without giving up. Now that I'm out, how can I give up? The Red Silk Army will be resurrected once more, and they will have to pay the price." "Yes. That's right. Blood. Only blood can be repaid. Utaris grinned and licked his lips, his face full of murderous excitement. I think it's time for those high and mighty fellows to recall the terror of the past. I, Utaris, will become their nightmare. You won't have the chance. Utaris, facing the fanatical avenger Utaris, Noah remained calm. He shook his head and said, 100,000 years is enough to change a lot of things. Your original enemies have also become stronger. The Red Silk Army is too weak. Utaris, although you are stronger than before, you still can't reverse the situation. Utaris's ambition would only cause him to fall into an irrecoverable situation. As a former good friend, Noah did not want Utaris to repeat the same mistakes. Utaris smiled and did not mind. Noah's rejection seemed to be within his expectations. He paused for a moment and laughed. You're right, Brother Noah, that's why I came here this time to ask for your help. What do you want me to help you with? Noah's heart sank slightly, and a bad premonition flashed in his heart. It's very simple. Utaris smiled strangely. He stepped forward, and a trace of madness appeared on his face. I want that thing. Impossible. Noah refused without thinking. It's not yours. You have no right to have it. What? Utaris was furious when he heard this, and the entire space shook. Noah, you dare to refuse me? Hee, Utaris, I'm doing this for your own good. What you want to do will never succeed. Noah's tone became calm, and he smiled slightly. Besides, aren't you afraid that its original owner will come back and settle the score with you? When he heard the words, original owner, Utaris raised his eyebrows slightly. After a while, he sneered. Hee, Brother Noah, you don't have to bring up Hermes to scare me. Hermes is powerful, but as far as I know, he died 100,000 years ago. A dead man, how can he settle the score with me? Hermes is dead, so his things are naturally ownerless. Utaris took a step forward, and a trace of red appeared in his eyes. Hee, Brother Noah, don't deny it. I know it has always been in your hands. Come on, give it to me. I need this thing now. With it, I'll have the qualifications to challenge those guys. The space fell silent, and there was a suffocating smell in the air. An oppressive aura filled the surroundings, as if there was an invisible pressure weighing down on his heart. Facing Utaris's pressure, Noah's expression finally changed. He gritted his teeth and firmly spat out a word. No! Roar. After Noah refused again, Utaris could not help but roar loudly. The ferocious figure of the sky dragon appeared behind him. At this moment, his hair stood on end, and his eyes revealed a fierce light. Noah, don't force me. I'll say it again. Give that thing to me immediately, or else, you'll pay the price for your stubbornness. The thing Utaris spoke of was a key, an important key. It was related to the whereabouts of the Lich King, Hermes, and the fate of the Scourge. It was indeed in Noah's hands, but with the relationship between Noah and Hermes, he could not hand over the key to fulfill Utaris's ambitions. Noah knew Utaris's personality too well. He would do anything to achieve his goals. Moreover, he was blinded by hatred and had to obtain that key no matter what. I won't give it to you. Utaris, if you want that thing, you'll have to step over my dead body. At this moment, Noah's expression returned to normal. He slowly drew a long sword, his body straight, and his purple robe fluttered in the absence of wind. Utaris roared again. Good, very good. Noah, you asked for this. Then, today is the day you die. As soon as Utaris finished speaking, there was a rumbling sound. The space where Noah and Utaris were standing began to shake violently, and their auras rose rapidly. At this moment, Utaris revealed his enormous body. He was a super monster with a snow-white upper body like a human's, a long snake-like lower body, and 6 enormous wings on his back. The Sky Dragon, a peerless king who roamed the sky, a powerful divine beast who grasped the law of space. The moment he saw the true body of the Sky Dragon, Noah's expression changed slightly. Utaris had become even stronger. It seemed that Utaris had not slacked off during the 100,000 years he had been imprisoned in Bartlos prison. Noah knew that this battle was unavoidable. Shatter space. In order to obtain that crucial key, Utaris finally made a move against his former brother. His eyes revealed a fierce light as he waved his hand. With a rumbling sound, the surrounding space began to collapse, and countless fragments bombarded Noah like raindrops. As soon as Utaris attacked, he used the powerful law of space. Spatial divine power surged out, and a powerful aura constantly pressed down from all directions. Sword of heaven and earth. Noah was not willing to be outdone, and he also activated his law power. The two opponents with godlike power collided, causing the entire space to shake. Divine power against divine power, law against law. The decisive battle between two gods was no longer a battle of pure strength, but a competition of laws. Chapter 808. The laws of heaven and earth were, in fact, elemental laws. The world itself was condensed from countless elements, including water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, and other elements. All the elements condensed into a world, which was Noah's laws of heaven and earth. Although they were dragons, sky dragons were very rare. They were born with the strength of the divine realm, and when they grew up, they became transcendent divine beasts. As for the laws of space, they were the innate skills of sky dragons. Utaris himself had the ability to travel through space. With a powerful bloodline and mysterious spatial ability, sky dragons were worthy of being the kings of dragons. It was no wonder that Firth and Frigga had the urge to worship them when they faced sky dragons. Boom! Walala! The laws of space collided with the laws of heaven and earth, bursting out violent vibrations. In the virtual space constructed by Utaris, powerful divine power spread out like ripples, constantly shining. Boom! Finally, the vibrations stopped. Utaris retreated dozens of steps, while Noah was sent flying. It took a long time for him to stop. Under the competition of divine power between the two sides, the winner was obvious, haha. Brother Noah, show me your true ability. Your strength can't satisfy my desire to fight at all. At this moment, a figure slowly floated above the head of the abnormally huge sky dragon. It was Utaris. At this moment, he had taken on a human form above the sky dragon's head. What? Noah's body shook violently. You've actually cultivated a divine clone? Standing in front of Noah, Utaris had already turned into two. One was a sky dragon clone, and the other was a human form clone. The two clones were of equal strength, which was fundamentally different from Noah's projection clone. Noah's projection doppelganger was just a virtual body constructed by him, a part of his power. Utaris's divine doppelgangers were two gods. They could transform into two Utaris in human form, and they could also transform into two sky dragons with terrifying strength. In other words, Noah had to face two Utaris alone. Judging from the few exchanges just now, Noah should not even be able to deal with one Utaris. After 100,000 years, the gap in strength between the two sides was getting bigger and bigger. Not bad. Utaris smiled faintly. In the 100,000 years I spent in the planar prison of Bartlos, in order to escape the forbidden space created by the Overgod, I constantly tried to comprehend it. Unfortunately, the forbidden space created by the Overgod was too powerful, and I gained nothing for a very long time. I didn't give up. Anyway, there was nothing else to do in this sealed space. I continued to persevere, and finally, one day, I had a breakthrough. A faint smile appeared on Utaris's face. Although my main body is still sealed, I can project my power through the sealed space bit by bit. Bit by bit. Over time, I finally condensed it into a virtual clone. Upon hearing this, Noah couldn't help but be shocked. Being able to transmit one's power through the spatial laws created by the supreme gods was no simple matter. It was like using a nail to pierce a stone wall. At the very least, Noah couldn't do it. Noah sucked in a breath of cold air. So, that massive rescue operation was also secretly directed by you, that's right. Utaris nodded and smiled. My virtual clones are active in the various main planes, secretly contacting my old subordinates and gathering strength bit by bit. Until now. I've come out. Everything is under my control. Utaris had only displayed a little of his strength, and it had the effect of intimidating the other party. He smiled slightly, and the Sky Dragon avatar roared. With a flash of light, the Sky Dragon avatar returned to its human form. Immediately after, the two avatars of Utaris began to merge and become one again. How is it, Brother Noah? You should be relieved by my current strength, right? Utaris, don't dare to say anything else, but I definitely won't suffer a loss against those old fellows. Compared to 100,000 years ago, Utaris's strength had greatly increased. Back then, he was a powerhouse on the same level as Noah, but now, he had far surpassed Noah. How is it, Brother Noah, think about it. Aren't you also dissatisfied with those tyrannical old fellows? Join us. With our strength, the brothers working together will be enough to make those old fellows suffer. The world is unpredictable. It's possible to defeat them. Utaris's face was full of a confident smile. So it's like this. Noah was silent for a moment. He lowered his head as if thinking about something. Seeing that Noah seemed to be moved, Utaris was delighted. He took a step forward and said in a clear voice, Brother Noah, if you are willing to join my Red Silk Army, I, Utaris, guarantee that your position in the Red Silk Army will not be lower than mine. We will have no distinction between each other. The Red Silk Army is both mine and yours, is that so? Noah raised his head after a long time, his gaze fixed on Utaris, and said seriously, Utaris, is what you said true? You want me to join the Red Silk Army and hold the position of deputy commander? Of course, of course. Hearing this, Utaris was overjoyed. For a god of Noah's strength to join the Red Silk Army, for the Red Silk Army, it was like adding wings to a tiger. Of course, if he could obtain the key to that world. Utaris thought so. He smiled and secretly clenched his fist. Okay, Noah pondered for a long time before finally agreeing. He raised his head and looked at Utaris, narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, I have decided to join you and become a member of the Red Silk Army. As long as you don't dislike me. Look at what you are saying. Brother Noah, what is the relationship between us? We are brothers. That's right. We have been through life and death together. How can I, Utaris, refuse my brother? Hearing Noah's agreement, Utaris was overjoyed. Noah was forced to agree to Utaris's condition. The other party was too strong. Even if he went all out, he did not have much chance of winning. There was no other way but to stabilize the other party first. Hearing that Noah was willing to join them, Utaris slightly let go of his hostility, and the atmosphere became relaxed. At this time, Utaris paused and sighed slightly. It's a pity. Hermes is no longer here. If he were, the three of us would definitely be able to kill our way to the main plane and directly destroy those old fellows. As Utaris spoke, he stared at Noah. He deliberately mentioned Hermes in order to remind him that the key should be handed over. When Noah heard this, he could not help but sneer in his heart. If Hermes was here, would it be your turn to be arrogant here? No matter how Noah compromised, Utaris was still thinking about the key. This made him very dissatisfied, but he did not show it on his face. He also sighed. Yes, if Hermes was here. Sigh. Unfortunately, Sigh. Utaris sneered and said no more. His words were very clear. If Noah did not know how to appreciate favors, then he would not be polite. For Utaris, in the face of naked profit, all brotherly feelings were fake. At this time, both sides fell silent. Utaris crossed his arms and stared coldly at Noah. The killing intent in his eyes grew stronger and stronger, and there seemed to be some restlessness in the air. Faced with Utaris's pressure, Noah understood that no matter how much he gave in, Utaris would still want him to hand over the key. In that case, Noah fiercely gritted his teeth and suddenly made up his mind. "Oh, look at my memory, I almost forgot about that thing." At this time, Noah patted his head and pretended to be suddenly enlightened. He reached into his bosom and took out something, handing it to Utaris. "Haha, Sir Captain, this is something that Hermes gave me to keep before he died, which is the key to that world." Noah's face was full of humility, and his address changed from Utaris to Sir Captain, indicating that he had completely joined the Red Silk Army and become a member of it. "Hermes is dead, Sir Captain, I have no use for this thing, so I'll hand it over now. No. It's a gift to the Red Silk Army. I believe that this key should be of greater use in your hands." Noah smiled, holding the key with both hands and respectfully handing it over to Utaris, as if he was a loyal subordinate. At least you know your place," Utaris coldly snorted in his heart. He coldly watched Noah's performance, but he was secretly vigilant. Yet he smiled and said, of course. Saying this, he carefully took the key and carefully examined it. "This is the key to that world?" Utaris narrowed his eyes, a suspicious look on his face. He had never let down his guard against Noah. How could it be so easy to make a god wholeheartedly surrender? His goal was still that key. What Noah handed over to Utaris was a square, dark object that was completely translucent and engraved with complex and profound patterns. "That's right. This is the key to that world. If you control it, you will control that world." Noah nodded affirmatively. "Is that so?" Utaris was skeptical. He had never seen the key, so he naturally did not know what it looked like. He tried to gently input a trace of power into the square box, but who would have thought that his enormous spatial divine power would disappear without a trace like a clay ox entering the sea? Chapter 809. Not good. I've been tricked. Utaris was shocked. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. The light illuminated the entire space. There was a strange mechanism in the black box. When the box was opened, it would emit a strong light. This light had no lethality, and its only function was to blind. Utaris had been wary of Noah's actions, but his greed had caused him to fall for the other party's ploy. The strong light burned his eyes, causing him to lose his ability to move in an instant. "Go to hell." At this moment, Noah moved. He pounced forward, and the divine longsword in his hand stabbed into Utaris's lower abdomen. Utaris felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. He opened his eyes, and his vision gradually returned to normal. Utaris gritted his teeth as he endured the pain. His gloomy eyes were filled with extreme fun. "You're a lunatic." Noah's face was calm. "I won't join a lunatic's plan. I'm going to kill you." Utaris clenched his teeth, his lips trembling. At this moment, he finally exploded. "Go to hell." Boom! There was a flash of light, and Noah felt as if Z's chest had been hit by a sledgehammer. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Huff! Huff! At this moment, Utaris's appearance was rather miserable. Noah's sword had pierced through his body from his chest to his back. Blood flowed from his chest to his lower abdomen. Utaris had suffered a great loss this time. Cough! 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 Looking at the seriously injured Utaris, Noah smiled bitterly. "Unfortunately, I still couldn't kill you." The sneak attack could only seriously injure Utaris, but it did not kill him. Noah's face was full of regret. "Kill me? Ha ha!" Upon hearing Noah's words, Utaris was not angry. Instead, he laughed contemptuously. "Noah, it's not that I'm looking down on you, but you want to kill me with your strength?" Utaras smiled and pressed his hand to his chest. With a slight force, he pulled the sword out of his body. The wound that had been pierced by the sword kept squirming and slowly began to heal. To think that I still underestimated you. Noah recovered from the shock and said with a gloomy face. Utaras's strength was not ordinary, but extremely strong. He had already surpassed the second stage of God, divine clone, and reached the third stage, immortal body. If he was allowed to take another step forward and reach the fourth stage, soul indestructible, he would be invincible in the entire main plane. In front of Noah, Utaras was still hiding his strength. It's no wonder that Utaras is so arrogant. With such terrifying strength and the key to that world, it's still possible for him to realize his ambitions. Noah sucked in a breath of cold air and thought to himself, "No, I will never give him the key." Noah shook his head and shook off this absurd thought. He gritted his teeth and secretly made up his mind. "You've underestimated me more than once." At this time, Utaras had completely recovered. He was playing with Noah's sword calmly. After a long time, he casually threw the sword away, slowly raised his head, and said coldly, "I don't have any patience anymore. Brother Noah, since you've been so stubborn, don't blame me for being impolite. I know you won't give me the key, but it's not like I don't have a way." A slight smile appeared on Utaras's face. He took a step forward with a fierce look in his eyes. "I'll kill you first, and then slowly torture your soul." I think the torture of the soul, even a god can't stand it, right? Noah's expression finally changed, and he gritted his teeth fiercely. "Utaras, even if I die, I will never give you the key. Give up." While speaking, Noah's body erupted with a strong light. The light was as dazzling as the sun, illuminating the entire space. What do you want to do?" Utaras was stunned, his eyes filled with fear. There was a trace of panic. "Utaras, I admit that I'm not your opponent, but don't even think about getting the key to that world." The expression on Noah's face was incomparably firm, and there was a trace of decisiveness as he said word by word. "Let's get out of hell together." You're crazy." Utaras opened his mouth wide. At this time, he finally understood that Noah was going to use the godhood to self-destruct and perish together with him. The godhood was the soul of a god. When a creature was promoted to a god, its soul would become abnormally powerful and condense into a godhood. The godhood was the core of a god's soul, the source of divine power. The self-destruction of the godhood was earth-shattering, and the price was that one's body and soul would be destroyed. Not only would the body turn into meat powder, but even the soul would be annihilated. Noah knew that he was going to die. In order to protect the key, he had no choice but to make this tragic decision. The dazzling brilliance burned the entire sky, and the powerful force caused the entire space to shake. With Noah as the center, the light continued to spread in all directions. When the godhood self-destructed, even someone as powerful as Utaras felt the fear of death. In this narrow space, there was nowhere to hide. He wanted to use spatial power to escape, but he found that the entire space had been sealed by Noah's divine power. No, not good. Utaras's eyes suddenly opened wide, and his vision turned blank. The powerful divine power instantly swallowed him. Boom, boom, boom. Under the powerful divine power, the space created by Utaras began to collapse. Countless cracks covered the entire space, and lightning and thunder scattered everywhere. It was a scene of the end of the world. Amidst the light, Noah's body gradually shattered and disintegrated. Under the shattered body, Noah's body slowly broke apart. As the body broke apart, Noah's soul was destroyed. At this moment, Noah's soul became very dim, as if it would disappear at any time. However, there was a satisfied smile on his face. "Goodbye, my continent. Goodbye, my people. As a guardian, I've done my duty. The space created by Utaris had completely shattered, revealing the scene outside. It was a vast sky, and below the sky was the beautiful and rich Noah continent. Noah desperately opened his eyes wide, greedily looking at the continent that Z had been protecting as if he wanted to take it all away. As if he had a panoramic view of the scenery, his eyes revealed deep longing. The scene before Noah's eyes gradually distorted. Gradually, a figure appeared in front of him. It was a human with short black hair. His pitch-black pupils were filled with unswerving determination. Ron, I'm leaving. You have to remember, the key to the lost world concerns the fate of the scourge on the main plane. You have to take good care of it, Noah muttered to himself. His soul slowly turned into smoke and began to dissipate. I'm taking Utaris away. He should have been your strongest enemy. Hermes, I've finally fulfilled your promise. I can rest in peace. Finally, Noah's eyelids closed, and his soul began to dissipate bit by bit, slowly disappearing into the sky. The world seemed to feel Noah's grief and became very dim. The billions of creatures on the ground felt their hearts palpitate at the same time. Although they did not know what had happened, this feeling of grief had been heavily suppressed in their hearts. Rumble, thunder boomed, and lightning filled the sky. Under the sky of Noah continent, heavy rain poured down, as if sighing for Noah's passing. In the ruined Bartolo's prison in the land of exile, a black figure was slowly walking up the stairs of a teleportation portal. When he was a few steps away from the teleportation portal, the black figure suddenly squatted down and covered his chest. What's going on? A sharp pain suddenly came from the bottom of my heart. The black figure was Ron, who was preparing to rush back to the land of exile. At this moment, he was crouching down, his right hand pressed tightly against his chest. His pale face was covered in sweat. He raised his head slightly, looking into the distance, his gaze focused. Noah continent? Could it be that something happened to Noah continent? Ron muttered to himself. I have to rush back immediately. Ron gritted his teeth and struggled to stand up. He quickly walked to the last few steps, placed his hand on the constantly rotating teleportation array, and took a deep breath. Noah continent. I'm back! Chapter 810. Whoosh, Lala. The torrential rain mixed with strong winds poured onto the land of the Noah continent. With the death of the Dimension Guardian Noah, the Noah continent seemed to have turned a new page. A black figure walked through the curtain of rain and strolled on the land of the Noah continent. He was wearing a hood and his face could not be seen clearly. His pitch-black snakeskin boots were half submerged in the water. His steps were firm and his body slowly leaned forward. Under the rain-covered hood, a pale and bloodless face was revealed. If Ron were here, he would definitely be shocked by this person's identity. He was none other than the divine necromancer Klein, whose soul had been defeated and devoured by Z. The black figure walked into an abandoned shack in the forest. At this moment, the black figure stopped in his tracks. He slowly took off his hood and knelt down on one knee. Lord Utaris. The Utaris standing in front of Klein was just a shadow. Due to the super explosion caused by Noah sacrificing Z's soul, even the powerful sky dragon was seriously injured. Not only did his body collapse, but even his soul was almost destroyed. However, compared to Noah, Utaris was much better. At least he was still alive and his strength would slowly recover. A greenish-white face with the unique skin color of the undead. Rainwater slowly dripped down from the wet black cloak. Seeing Klein in front of him, a smile appeared on Utaris' face. Are you still calling me Lord Utaris? Child. Hearing this, Klein's body shook violently. A look of ecstasy appeared on his face. After hesitating for a moment, he bowed deeply. Yes, father. This was Utaris' promise to him. If he helped Utaris escape from Bartolo's prison, Utaris would take him as his adopted son and share his joy. Glory. And Klein had indeed done it. For Klein, To be able to receive the protection of a true God and be taken in as his adopted son was naturally a lot of good. Not to mention anything else, he was able to be killed by Ron when he was revived. Kwang's resurrection was thanks to Utaris. Klein, you know I don't like these tedious formalities. Utaris smiled faintly and waved his hand. Get up, my child. You don't have to kneel when you see me in the future. Yes, father. Klein kowtowed deeply and stood up with a face full of joy. He knew that Z had made a great contribution, which was why Utaris had made an exception for him. If it were anyone else, they would not have received such treatment. Father, how is your body now? Klein looked Utaris up and down, looking at him. Are you? His soul asked with concern. I still miscalculated. I didn't expect Noah to sacrifice Z's soul. Although he's lucky to not die, his strength is not as strong as before. Utaris took a deep breath and stared at Klein. Klein, I need some time to recover my strength. How long will it take? Father. When Klein heard that, he became nervous. His fate was already tied to Utaris's. If Utaris died, then what he had done previously would be, everything he had done before would become meaningless. It may take a few months or it may take a few years. But don't worry, my strength will eventually recover. It's just a matter of time, Utaris muttered, his eyes flashing with a trace of sternness. Oh right, Klein, I still need you to do something. Father, please speak. Klein's spirit was shaken as he replied. Now that Noah is dead, the Noah continent no longer has a guardian. For you, conquering this continent is no longer a difficult task. According to our plan, the Noah continent was originally a springboard for us to attack the main plane. Of course, it's only a springboard. The ultimate goal of our Red Silk Army is to have a place in the main plane, Utaris chuckled. Haha, of course, if we want to have a place in the main plane, just relying on the current strength of the Red Silk Army isn't enough. Although I, Utaris, am a bit arrogant, I still have self-awareness. Klein was stunned. Could it be that the strength of the Noah continent is still not enough? It's still not enough. Utaris shook his head. The current Red Silk Army is no longer comparable to the Red Silk Army of the past. The current Red Silk Army can't even compare to the strength of an ordinary country in the main plane, let alone a main army. Alas, as he said this, Utaris fell into deep thought. He was recalling the past glory of the Red Silk Army. Klein rolled his eyes and smiled. Although the Red Silk Army is facing many difficulties now, I believe that father will have a way, yes. Utaris' expression shook as he recovered from his contemplation. The only way to restore the Red Silk Army to its former glory is to obtain that lost world. Lost world? Klein was shocked. What is that? It's not a thing, but a complete world. It's the most important treasure left behind by the great existence of the Calamity Army 100,000 years ago, the Lich King Hermes. Utaris' eyes shone. This world is a part of the primary plane, and it's also a damaged primary plane. As long as we obtain it, we'll be able to increase the strength of our Red Silk Army for a short period of time, and we'll even be able to compete with those powerful existences. What? There's actually such a thing? Klein became excited when he heard this. Great, we must obtain it. Right, father, how can we obtain that world? After the fall of the Lich King Hermes, the lost world also disappeared. Legend has it that he used his supreme power to seal the entire world, and the only thing that can undo the seal is the key to enter that world. Utaris lowered his head and stared at Klein's face, saying each word clearly. As long as we obtain the key to that lost world, we can obtain that lost world, then. Father, how can we obtain that key? Klein asked. I don't know, Utaris shook his head blankly. These things were secrets among secrets back then, and no one knew. Of course, other than Hermes. I also heard some things by accident, so it's not too accurate. I haven't even seen what that key looks like. Then doesn't that mean we don't have a chance? Klein said unwillingly. That key might be in Noah's hands. When I fought with him, I vaguely sensed this. When Hermes fell, Noah was by his side. At this point, Utaris paused. This is just my intuition. Of course, he wouldn't be so stupid as to keep the key by his side, but I believe that he would at least know its whereabouts. But it's a pity that he's dead. Utaris sighed slightly and said regretfully. Don't worry, father. As long as that key is in the Noah continent, it'll be easy. Someone will always know some clues. Klein laughed. He licked his lips and revealed a sinister smile. Father, believe me, even if I have to turn the entire Noah continent upside down, even if I have to dig 3 feet into the ground, I will still find that key. Very good, child. Utaris smiled. I believe that you will not disappoint me. In fact, you have never disappointed me. Go! Klein, my child, go and do this well. The moment I rule the world, you will share my joy. Che glory! Utaris laughed heartily. His body flashed, and he disappeared from the space. In the abandoned shack, Utaris's figure disappeared, leaving only Klein standing there. The rain was still falling, and the world was white. Yes, father, I will definitely do this well. Klein raised his head and muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with confidence, and a sinister light constantly flickered. At this moment, Klein's eyes had already turned red. He clenched his fists tightly, and his body trembled slightly due to excitement. He gritted his teeth, and every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. Ron, I will return the humiliation you brought me 100 times over. Come. I'll wait for you in the Noah continent. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.